not to put the fires out. Finally, please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. Right, good afternoon and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on Monday the 24th of April 2023. I'm the Chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg. Before I start the meeting, my Vice Chair, Councillor Sarah Chamberlain, who should be sitting there, she's changed, has given her apologies. Therefore, I'd like to ask Councillor Ollie Davey to be my Vice Chair. Please, can members raise their hands if in agreement, or raise your hand if you're against. Councillor Pratt?
What are we doing?
You're voting for? Yeah? Voting for Ollie? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davey, for agreeing to be Vice Chair. The supporting officers present today are Ed Freeman at the end, Assistant Director of Planning Strategy and Development Management, Wendy Ormsby at her second Planning Committee meeting. She survived the first one all right, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. This meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account, so can I remind all members and officers making a contribution to the meeting to use a microphone or your comments will not be heard. And I would be interested at the end of this meeting to hear any feedback from members or members of the public as to whether the acoustics, how they compare with the acoustics in the council chamber, because I know there have been difficulties with some people hearing. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Over to you, Wendy, to do that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Wragg.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor De Sarum.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Gazzard.
Present.
Councillor Key.
Present, Wendy.
Councillor Lawrence.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Present, Wendy.
Councillor Skinner.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. We are caught up for today's meeting, Chair.
Thank you. The running order and speakers for today's planning applications can be found on page 4 of the agenda. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meetings, pages 5 to 12. Is it the committee's wish that I sign the minutes of the meetings held on 28th of March 2023 as a true and accurate record? Please raise your hands if in support. Thank you. So that's unanimous. I'll sign the minutes. There we are. Right, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, apologies. Wendy?
Yes, we've received 7 apologies. Councillor Rylance, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Pook, Councillor Chamberlain, Councillor Bloxham, Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Wendy. Agenda item 4, declaration of interest. Do any members, including non-committee members, have any interest to declare? If so, please raise your hand and state which agenda item your interest relates to, the nature and type of interest. I'll start by saying, yes, I've had emails regarding the first application, Douglas Gardens, and the second one, the solar farm for Wimple and Rockbeer. Suppose lobbying, emails, or for information only. Thank you. Yes, Bruce Desarum.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've received lobbying emails for agenda item 8, the Exmouth Littleham one, and I've also received a information pack or information email from the applicant for agenda item 9, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Lawrence.
Yes, same as agenda item 9. I've had a couple of emails and I've had contact with some of the people who live near me, but I am the councillor, so I'm a ward member. So.
Yeah, Councillor Key.
Yes, emails on 8 and 9.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I've also had emails on item 8 and item 9.
Yeah, Councillor Gazzard. Yeah, right.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point of information that due to an urgent hospital appointment, I couldn't attend item 8 and item 9 for the site visit, so I won't be voting on those when they come up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for that. And Councillor Brown, same. Councillor Skinner.
Well, I did declare an interest at the last one regarding the Exmouth application, as it's my family. I used to farm that land and I made that clear, but it was over 30 years ago, but I just made that point. I've also received emails like everybody else has with application 221954 Douglas Gardens. Number 9 is actually partly in my ward as well, so I've met with different people at differing times. I have had letters and emails and the like on application 220783, which is a solar farm application as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've also had the same emails on items 8 and 9. I've also, on item 8, met with some of the objectors, and I've also attended a presentation where the scheme was outlined. And on item 9, I noticed the Devon Wildlife Trust submitted some comments, and I'm a member of the Devon Wildlife Trust.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Right. I wonder if I can ask the solicitor, Mr. Hunter, when it comes to meeting with objectors, supporters, or going to presentations, I believe something's in the Constitution regarding that. I don't know if you want to look at the Constitution first and then advise, or whether you feel able to now. You want to look at it?
I can quickly say off the top of my head that I believe that it's encouraged that the members go as a formal site visit or with a planning officer, that they go on their own. But I can double check exactly what the wording says.
That's my understanding of the
it.
Constitution. Should be arranged by officers. So it's to safeguard
Obviously
members,
to safety,
just to be aware in the future, because I'd hate to see you compromise yourselves. Thank you. Matters of urgency, there are none. Any items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded? There are none. Planning appeals statistics, pages 13 to 18. Mr. Freeman, please, or when is it Mrs. Ormsby?
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see in the agenda, you have a list of appeals received and appeals in process for this month, but there are no appeal decisions over the last month. We haven't received any from the Inspectorate, so there are none to report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 8, planning application 221954. It's a major outline application for Douglas Gardens, Douglas Avenue, Exmouth, pages 19 to 54. And we have a number of speakers, but I'll get Mr. Freeman first to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware of this application, having considered it at your previous meeting and been out to the site for an inspection this morning. The application was deferred from your previous meeting to visit the site to look at issues of highways, landscape and sewage issues. So I will focus on those 3 issues just in a quick summary of the key issues now. So just focusing on the highways concerns, members will recall that you asked Devon County Highways to be invited to the site inspection. Unfortunately, they were unable to attend, but they have confirmed that their comments, as detailed in the report, remain their position on this application. They continue to have no objections on highways grounds, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. As we saw on the site inspection, trying to find the plan. The access is proposed off of Douglas Avenue in the place of number 76 Douglas Avenue, which is to be demolished. It's proposed to create an access of 5.5 metres wide with 2 metre high footpath on either side and a landscape buffer either side of that to the neighbouring properties. Devon County Highways are satisfied that adequate visibility displays can be accommodated within the development and so have raised no objections. The issue of the highways was also an issue in 2015 on the previous appeal on this site. That was an appeal for non-determination, but East Devon District Council took a view as to how they would have viewed that application had it been within their control at the time of the appeal and did not challenge it on highways grounds. The inspector did, however, consider the highways concerns that were raised by the residents and concluded that that should not be a ground for dismissing the appeal. The appeal was dismissed on landscape grounds alone. Turning to the landscape issues, members will have seen from our site inspection that the site is quite a significant gradient down from Douglas Avenue, with a plateau sort of to the rear of the houses at Douglas Avenue and then quite a steep drop down into the Mare Valley. The site's indicative layout that's on the screen shows you how the developers intend potentially to accommodate development on the site. It demonstrates that the proposed 43 homes can be accommodated, and that this would be effectively through sort of terracing into 2 clear terraces across the site with retaining structures in between, with open space over to the top of the screen that you can see and the suds basin in the bottom right hand corner of the site to accommodate surface water. We also went and had a look from the other side of the Mare Valley, looking across towards the site, and I think I have some photographs on here looking back towards the site. And I think from these viewpoints it becomes clear that the site sits almost as an infill within the development that's there. You can see in the background the houses in Douglas Avenue and other houses within the town beyond. To the left hand side you can see an infill dwelling that was built to the rear of one of the houses in Douglas Avenue adjoining the site, and then across, this is also looking up at the site, and across in terms of the wider area you can see across to the Plum Park development on the right hand side. This means that while the site is a greenfield site and is no doubt attractive and contributes positively to the Mare Valley, its development would be read in the context of the rest of the existing town, Douglas Avenue, and the surrounding developments. And so while a partial erosion of the green and open character of the Mare Valley, that harm, which was identified in the 2015 appeal, has to now be weighed against our lack of a 5-year housing land supply and the fact that the policies that seek to protect development beyond the built-up area boundary of the town can no longer carry significant weight. With those issues in mind, officers' view is that the landscape harm is outweighed by the benefits of this development in terms of its contribution to housing supply and enhancing our housing supply position in the face of not having a 5-year housing land supply. As I mentioned, the presumption in favour of sustainable development in the MPPF applies, and the tilted balance has to apply, and therefore those issues have to carry significant weight, and in our view as officers outweigh the landscape harm that's been identified. Just finally, the other key issue that was raised was in terms of sewerage. Again, South West Water were invited to attend the site inspection but sent their apologies. They did, however, provide us with some comments in writing on the application, which raises no fundamental objections to the scheme, but they do point out that they would not want to see surface water discharging into the combined sewer. With that in mind and reflecting on the conditions since the site inspection, I would recommend that condition 9 in your agenda papers be amended so that that point is highlighted. Obviously this is an outline application and the detailed drainage scheme would need to be submitted as part of the reserved matters but I would ask that members give delegated authority to myself in consultation with the chair and ward members to amend condition 9 to state that notwithstanding the submitted details, there should be no discharge of surface water to the combined sewer, just so that that is made clear at this stage. So those are the key issues. As I say, I think the main issue to consider here is balancing the landscape impact against the lack of a 5-year housing land supply and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. One further thing to just quickly pick up on in terms of that is one question I was asked on the site inspection was about the affordable housing requirements in this case. The built-up area boundary, just as it defines the suitable, where development should be accommodated within the town and where countryside basically starts, it equally defines where our affordable housing requirement for 25% within the built-up area boundary of the town and 50% applies beyond the built-up area boundary of the town. Because, as I've said, those policies can't carry significant weight in the face of us not having a 5-year housing land supply and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. Equally, I don't believe it would be reasonable to require the 50% affordable housing that would apply usually beyond the built-up area boundary of the town. And so, as officers, we feel the 25% affordable housing that's offered with this scheme, which in this case would be 3 first homes, 6 rented and 2 shared ownership properties, is acceptable. So the application is recommended for approval. You see in the agenda there are 2 recommendations before you. The first is to adopt the appropriate assessment in relation to the impacts on European protected habitats that are detailed in the report. And 2, to approve the application subject to legal agreements securing habitat mitigation contribution, the affordable housing I've mentioned, NHS contribution and management company to maintain common areas on the site. It's also subject to the conditions as detailed in the report and subject to those. And the amendment I mentioned to condition 9, the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I'd like to call the is it on? Yeah. I'd like to call the speakers now, please. And they seem to be all objectors. Jill Wood, who is speaking on behalf of Zoe Harris. You'd like to come forward to the microphone? Thank you.
I push the button in the middle, don't I?
Yes, please.
That's it.
I am Gillian Wood, speaking on behalf of Zoe, who lives at 74 Douglas Avenue with her 2 young children and strongly objects to this proposal. She works in a senior position in the local NHS trust and is concerned about the following issues. 1. The single access point will be created by knocking down a perfectly good family home lived in by her grandparents, in fact. The single access point is at the top of an ascending bend on Douglas Avenue and with limited visibility will not be safe for the vehicle movements generated by 44 houses. In the last few years, a car came round the corner, smashing a brick wall, wooden fence and mature hedge, debris flying into the residents of 74. Number 2, the community infrastructure is already beyond capacity. I am especially concerned about the lack of NHS resources to meet the needs of the local population. Oversubscribed GP practices in Exmouth, increased waiting lists for community stroke rehabilitation and specialist clinics. Finally, the local acute hospital routinely not meeting its emergency performance targets due to the continually increasing demand. There are also issues with school capacity. Children being transported from Exmouth away from their community. This is not ideal for family support from the schools. 3. This proposal does not align with the East Devon local plan. It is the current local plan that decisions need to be based on. Indeed, this development conflicts with numerous strategies in the local plan, including strategies 7 and 22. There would be significant impact on the character and appearance of the area, and the site lies outside the built-up area boundary. According to the East Devon local plan, any changes to the built-up area boundary can only occur if it does not harm the distinctive amenity and environmental qualities of an area, all of which Douglas Gardens would seriously do. I am aware that the Council will be under pressure to meet its 5-year housing target. But it is imperative that you do the right thing and demonstrate integrity, credibility, by supporting the East Devon Plan and the Exmouth Neighbourhood Plan, which was developed with strong community engagement and cost. Please don't knock down a family home, create an unsafe access, conflicting with community strategies and plans, and also the rules for 76 as on the Land Register number DN 178149, which states that there should be no change of use or activity to the detriment of the neighbours or neighbourhood. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mrs Wood. Speaker number 2, Robert Smith, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr Smith.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Smith and I am objecting to the development. I live at number 55 Douglas Avenue, which is immediately opposite the proposed site. As the committee will have seen this morning for themselves, the entrance proposed for this development is completely unsuitable. The access is dangerous. The entrance will be on an incline on a bend on an already busy road which sees traffic consistently breaking the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There have already been instances of cars demolishing the boundary walls of 55, 53, 72 and 74. The access point will also add more traffic to the already busy rat run to avoid Salterton Road and Littleham Cross traffic lights, and further added to by the significant traffic from Plum Park, which is causing congestion, potholes, environmental damage and poor air quality. It will also cause a risk for emergency vehicles, such as ambulances and fire engines, attempting to get to people who urgently need them, putting their lives at significant risk. Because of the incline and bend on this stretch of Douglas Avenue, residents in the vicinity of the proposed site already experience problems when going in and out of their driveways. The visibility is restricted and the speed of the existing traffic makes this manoeuvre extremely dangerous. Cars parked on the road frequently add to this hazard. An additional safety concern is that of heavy goods vehicles servicing the site, where they will have to negotiate a narrow exit or entrance with poor visibility. The development will have a great detrimental effect on the environment. The effect that substantial house has to be demolished in order to gain access, the removal of countless tons of soil because of the sloping nature of the site, and the number of HGV lorries needed to move this soil will undoubtedly have a severe effect on our air quality and a great increase on the carbon footprint of this development. Green spaces are valuable for our general well-being, and the Mere Valley should be preserved for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Next, Michael Keep. Mr Keep, you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My wife and I have lived at 78 Douglas Avenue for the past 25 years. We are next door to the proposed demolition site, ground zero, so to speak. Together with our neighbour at number 74, we are either side of the proposed sole entrance to the Douglas Garden building site. 2 sides of our properties will be badly affected by construction and regular traffic, the frontage and for the entire length. Our bedroom is only 4 feet from the proposed site roadway. The driveway to and fro from our house is feet away from this site entrance, which is too close for comfort and will be too dangerous to use. All vehicles exiting the site will be coming uphill from the field to the junction and have to noisily brake before turning left or right into potholed Douglas Avenue, adding to the stream of vehicles using the avenue as a rat run and shortcut. As homeowners, we all have the right to enjoy our homes peacefully, without intrusion by a public authority giving approval to allow the demolition of a perfectly good house the garden and the green pastures below. This is a direct violation of the right. Furthermore, the period of construction of Douglas Gardens shall be in violation of the legally binding title deeds, already mentioned, which apply to the current owners of number 76, which state in paragraph 10, not to use the land thereby conveyed or any building to be erected thereon for any offensive noise or dangerous trade business or occupation or any purpose which should or might or grow to be in any way a nuisance, damage, grievance or annoyance to the vendors, their successors in title or their tenants of any of the neighbouring properties or the neighbourhood, or which might tend to depreciate or lessen the value of any such neighbouring properties. Fat chance of peace when the earth-moving equipment, trucks, bulldozers, front loaders, cranes, excavators, site offices, cement mixers, white vans and so forth move in next door with the resultant offensive noises and air pollution, causing a nuisance, damage, grievance and annoyance to us homeowners. What is the point of the title deeds if the covenants are allowed to be broken, which incidentally are subject to serious fines when violated? Again, tons of earth will have to be removed. Douglas Avenue residents can once again expect months of heavily laden dump trucks using Douglas Avenue as an extended building site. A report back in 2016 stated that the avenue was already seriously affected by heavy traffic, and since then additional volume from Plum Park has made the situation worse. Traffic jams at Little and Cross are already a nightmare and can only get worse if this planning proposal is accepted. A survey of vehicles passing number 76 was made last Monday,
please, Mr. Keep.
Between 4 and 5, which resulted in an average of 44 vehicles every 15 minutes. We don't want Clinton Devon estates. I therefore implore the committee to turn down the plan now and for good. Thank you. That is our building.
Good afternoon, committee. If this application had a sell-by date, it's past it. Previously rejected by this committee and the subsequent appeal dismissed by the Planning Inspectorate in 2016. I submit that the conclusions for dismissing the appeal in 2016 are just as important and relevant in 2023, if not more so. Sustainable development has three roles: economic, social and environmental, all mutually dependent. The inspector said, while the development would be economically beneficial in providing jobs during construction, it would be significantly detrimental to the environment. Not just detrimental, significantly detrimental. The wider agricultural landscape can be seen from a number of vantage points. The inspector said, however good the landscaping framework, the proposals would have a significant effect on the countryside, altering it from a rural landscape to being part of a built-up area, and overall, the proposal would be significantly harmful to the character and appearance of the area. Not just harmful, significantly harmful, the inspector's words. Developments in the area such as Plum Park, Goodmore's Farm, Roll Gardens and Alcombe Gardens, etc. are all contributing to increasing stress on an already struggling infrastructure. The sewage infrastructure is a case in point. How can more and more housing be built against a sewage system that's not fit for purpose? South West Water, not exactly blameless themselves, cite urban creep as a key issue. Considerable growth has occurred in the area with new housing estates and roads established. Urban creep threatens water quality because it's reducing the amount of land available for water to naturally drain into. This means that even more rainwater is entering the sewer network than ever before. This issue is getting frequent national coverage in the press and media. In 2022, Exmouth Beach was ranked 5th worst blue flag beach for sewage spills in the country, with 650 hours of discharge. Not great advertising for Exmouth. I would therefore ask you to carefully consider the very significant impact of this proposed development on the Mare Valley and its wider environment, the residents of Douglas Avenue having yet again to endure years of disruption, noise and inconvenience, and the impact on their mental health and well-being. The increasing infrastructure issues such as sewage, education, NHS, etc. we've heard before as well. If this application is approved, the scarring of our beautiful Mere Valley would be irreversible and would in turn open the floodgates to further development all the way down the valley. This is morally and environmentally so wrong. In summing up the appeal decision, the inspector said, "In my view, the environmental harm outweighs the economic and social benefits, and the proposal would not represent sustainable development." I hope that following the site visit, members would have concluded that for the reasons you've heard today, plus the previous decision in 2016, the application should be refused. You are on strong ground. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Simon Davidson, on behalf of the Avenues Residents Association. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Davidson. It's gone off again.
Good afternoon. This objection represents the joint views of Tara and the Exmouth Communities Association. We believe that there was inadequate discussion of or challenge to a number of key points at the planning meeting held on March 28th. It appears that the lead planning officer's advice is based upon expediency in helping to meet arbitrary housing targets which are currently under review, and that he has relied too heavily upon a draft local plan that is currently suspended pending written guidance from the Secretary of State. Despite the exceptional circumstances and disruption to council business caused by COVID-19 since 2020, the LPO is seeking to override the existing local plan on the basis that it is more than 2 years old and has not been formally reviewed. He also says that the draft plan would remove some of the conditions that currently act as blockers for this application, and that this is a preferred development site. With the plan suspended indefinitely, what it might seek to provide for at some future date is subject to change and cannot be taken into account when considering this application. To allow the application on the basis of what might be adopted in a future plan would be illogical and unsafe. Whereas, whether reviewed or not, the existing local plan acts as a moderator on developments like this. It is Tara's view that he is at fault and is demonstrating predetermination. At the previous meeting, the LPO appeared to downplay the proximity of the proposed development to the East Devon AONB, which is about 500 metres from the proposed new built-up area boundary. The movement of the boundary is a transparent mechanism to allow this site to be developed. The scale of building will irreversibly change the character of this part of Exmouth and the Mere Valley, and this committee has the power to overrule these changes under these circumstances. Additionally, EDDC, Exmouth Town Council and Clinton Devon Estates have a joint commitment to deliver a proposed public space called Mere Valley Park. Clinton Devon Estates are blocking the development of the park on the grounds of loss of valuable agricultural land, whilst intending to sell land for house building, which is immediately adjacent and of greater agricultural worth. The LPO gives the lack of a demonstrable 5-year housing supply in East Devon as grounds for recommending approval. However, until the written guidance is issued by the Secretary of State, the impact upon the MPPF and the future years of buffering for local plans are unknown, hence the suspension of the plan. In any event, the number of houses proposed has a trivial impact upon the overall situation for East Devon, whereas there is already a more than adequate supply for the Exmouth area. Putting houses where they are not required to meet unsafe targets is both perverse and possibly an abuse of authority. This is exacerbated by the fact that the applicants have reduced the proportion of affordable dwellings which are required in Exmouth from 50% to 25%. We urge the committee to consider these facts carefully before reaching a decision. At the first meeting, the Chair commented about the possibly very thin ice that the committee faced with this application. That may have been an allusion to the risk of the applicant launching an appeal should the decision go against them. We respectfully remind the committee that the objectors can also seek legal redress via judicial review should this application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go to Exmouth Town Council and Councillor Brian Bailey, please. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here representing the views of Exmouth Town Council Planning, which is a consultative committee on these decisions. First of all, it appears that you've totally ignored the Exmouth Neighbourhood Plan, which has various policies. EN1, building outside a built-up area. EN3, the Mare Valley Park, EN5 and 6, the impact of additional surface water, and EN8, in appropriate planting and ecological approaches to the already present flood risk. We find that the applicant has said these houses are needed in Exmouth. Well, I don't believe they are. The houses that are needed in Exmouth are affordable houses or social for rent houses, not houses that are going to be in excess of £350,000, which the young people of Exmouth would find it impossible to purchase. Also, I believe that this authority is not taking any notice whatsoever of the NPPF, which clearly states that an exception site such as this, building in the open country, has 4 recommendations that they would accept. This application meets none of them at all. So this makes me wonder, it really does. Also, we have a problem with the, excuse me, the roadway, or the proposed roadway. There's a significant difference in the plan of 9 metres for the visibility displays. Well, these visibility displays are part of people's gardens. So if, for argument's sake, if it was to be built and people in the neighbourhood decided they want to put a fence up so they didn't have to look at trucks going up and down all day, the visibility display would just disappear overnight. So it's not justifiable. Also, the danger we were there this morning, as you knew, and we saw several trucks going up and down on a bend, and they were having great difficulty getting around the bend because people were parking both sides of the road, and it's a very, very fast road. And these vehicles weigh 32 tonnes when they're loaded, a significant weight. And to get 32 tonnes out of that little narrow entrance is going to be a severe problem for the driver and for the people in the residence area, because they're going to be on maximum revs, the exhaust will be blowing up dust everywhere, and the people of Litlam, and especially Douglas Avenue, have suffered from dust for the last 5 years with Plum Park. It was an ecological disaster, there's no two ways about it. So please take that into account when you're making your decision. The local sewerage is, as we all know, you just get a slightest shower of rain and it overflows onto the Mare, which we've been complaining about for years and years and years, and South West Water don't seem to take any notice whatsoever. And if this development is going into a combined sewer, that shouldn't be the case. It should be separate. The sewerage should be separate, and the rainwater should be totally separate. This is why it's causing a flood at the moment, because
3
it's
minutes,
combined.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. Where are we? Yes. The other thing is, which was mentioned just a little bit before, is the health facilities, which aren't sustainable. We've got facilities in Exmouth in this area for 30,891 people, which is at present oversubscribed by 438. So I don't believe that to be sustainable at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. And now we have Easton John, the agent for the application. You have 3 minutes, Mr. John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Following last month's meeting, you're already aware of the key attributes of the scheme. There's no need to rehearse these further. I'll therefore confine myself to a number of brief points. This is not an opportunistic application. It has been drawn up in express response to Mr. Freeman's own advice to you in February 2022 regarding the Council's housing land supply shortfall and the need to cover favourably consider sites which do not fit with the currently adopted strategy, but where no substantial harm would arise and the development is sustainable. The need for more housing, which Mr. Freeman identified, remains, and if anything has become more acute in the last year. Prior to submitting this application, members' views on the scheme were sought via your members' advisory panel. Your response was positive. Members supported the proposals, requested 25% affordable housing and a minimum of 20% biodiversity net gain. They also asked that the scheme come forward quickly so that it can address your housing shortage. My client has addressed each of these requirements and provided a much more extensive suite of landscaping measures to boot. There are no policy reasons to reject this application. The Council cannot demonstrate an adequate housing land supply. As a result, and as your officers will confirm, both the Council and the Town Council's neighbourhood plan policies on the location of new housing are out of date. In such circumstances, the government's approach in its national policy is explicit. Planning permission is to be granted unless there are very clear reasons to the contrary. There are no technical reasons to reject this application. All the technical stakeholders are content, as you've heard, with the proposals. Concerns regarding such matters as construction, valid, but can be dealt with carefully through conditions applied and which are proposed as part of the grant of planning permission. The scheme would not generate any significant harm, quite the contrary, and permission should therefore be granted. This is a great scheme. It is really well designed, with really strong landscaping and biodiversity credentials. The estate has a very strong track record of delivery on its promises and of driving high quality design. It will provide a properly balanced mixture of housing in a highly sustainable location. It will provide housing and affordable housing for which there is a strong and acknowledged local need. Therefore, looking clearly and objectively at the scheme, the Council and the community needs this scheme. There are no reasonable reasons to reject it, and I therefore ask you very much that you approve the scheme as per your officer's repeated recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. Next, the board member, Councillor Nick Hookway, please. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Hookway.
Right, okay. Well, I'm going to try to offer some sort of synthesis of what we've heard here today. I absolutely agree with the comments made by residents and objectors. I'm also very interested to hear what Mr. John has just said and his reference to the advisors members panel, the first meeting. It was not, I have to tell the committee, as sweet and light as Mr. John would have us believe, because I raised then at that point the issue of access and said that access was inadequate and unsuitable. As the committee will remember from this morning, we had a site visit and we went down a country lane and we walked into countryside. This is a development, in my view, that will cause significant harm. It will score significant visual harm. It will have a significant impact upon the Mare Valley. It is unsightly. It will be highly visible for miles. And in my view, it is out of scale. Mr. Freeman talked about landscaping. There is a significant gradient on this site that will cause considerable problems. These have already been mentioned. If we could go back to the map of the plan map, please. The terracing there, I think, is completely out of context and totally harmful. It simply is a case of jamming in as many houses as possible. If you look to the top right, you will see there houses of Plum Park. And I would suggest to you, members of the committee, that the application does not in any way fit in with the design of Plum Park and the design of Douglas Avenue to the north. It is incompatible. It will stand out and be completely incongruous. Also, in terms of the design, although a lot has been made about biodiversity and sewage and so on, there has been no provision made for amenity open space. Due to the very limited access of this site, families will probably be unlikely to keep going up a very steep access road and will expect there to be some form of open space with a playground. There's nothing on there at all, and that is a very serious omission in my view. So also, as I've mentioned, that the site will be highly visible even from the coastal path. So there is significant visual harm and harm to the landscape. I'm not at least a bit interested in that and impressed by that at all. I note comments about 5-year housing supply. This is a very difficult matter. I also note comments about the emerging local plan. In my view, my opinion is that we have to stick to the current local plan. We have no idea what the emerging local plan will be, how it will look like. It is completely in limbo. Okay, so I think I've made most of my points, but I just want to make absolutely sure. Yes, the other thing is to do with the area of outstanding natural beauty, which is clearly visible on the other side of the valley. In my view, that development will be completely out of kilter, looking across the valley. And for those people who appreciate the importance of areas of outstanding natural beauty, I think again it is incongruous and it is out of keeping. So I ask the committee to seriously consider rejecting this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Now, before I ask members, do members have any questions? You have a question. Could I ask Mr. John if he's prepared to take questions?
Of course I am,
Thank you. Would you like to come up to the microphone then? Thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Well, my question is going to be to Mr. Freeman, so you're right, Mr. Johns. It's
Okay.
okay. And my question is because we've heard earlier, which I think is a really relevant point, and although I may understand it a little myself, I think it's really important to get in front in this room here today that there was this application came before this authority before. It went to appeal, and the appeal overturned the planning, and it was refused. And I think what's really important here today is to understand the refusal that was based upon then in 2015 or 16 or so, I apologise for the exact date, but whenever that was, a few years ago, to today. And what is the significant difference between then and today? Because I think if we can overcome that, I think it opens the door. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the significant difference really is that we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, fundamentally, which means the policies that protect this area and protect the countryside immediately abutting built-up area boundaries can't carry significant weight, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development then applies. So members may recall, I think this was an issue in 2015 with the original application, and at the time of the application we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply, and officers recommended approval to members. It was deferred for a site inspection, and the applicants appealed for non-determination of the application. The council subsequently came to a view as to what it would have done with the application, and the view was taken that it should be refused on landscape grounds primarily. And the appeal was then heard, but by the time the appeal was heard, we had subsequently adopted the local plan in early 2016, and that gave us a 5-year housing land supply and changed the planning considerations in this case, with the presumption being that decisions be made wholly in accordance with that development plan that was then adopted. So effectively we've gone full circle in those 5-6 years since then of we've had that local plan in place, we've had a 5-year housing land supply through the first 5 years of the plan. That plan is now old, it's now out of date, we no longer have a 5-year housing land supply, and we are arguably back to where we were in 2015 when we were last considering this application as a council, whereby the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. So that is fundamentally what's changed and what leads to officers again recommending this application for approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Desarum, you have a question?
No, it's not a question.
No, can I just stop you there then, Councillor Desarum? Councillor Desarum is a ward member, therefore he should have had 5 minutes to speak. All right. So you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. That's what I was.
No, you have longer than that.
That's what I was actually coming to ask you, Chair, but I didn't wish to.
Yeah, you have unlimited
I didn't wish to
time.
jump in because I heard Councillor Skinner's fine words.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Having been on the site visit this morning with most of you, my comments will be directed to the landscape impact, highway safety, and drainage matter. Now, if we take each in turn, looking at the landscape, we know that this site is not afforded any specific green belt protection per se in planning terms, but it is clear that it could be regarded as a green area of particular importance to the local community. I feel that if we drill down and examine the reasons for the various objections, they can be summed up as being, firstly, a desire to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, and secondly, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. These objectives can be found in para 138 of the NPPF, but I do note that this site is not a greenbelt one, but nonetheless I feel we must justify any decision today based on some of this criteria. In 2017, when I was a new councillor, Plum Park, the nearby settlement, came to the then Development Management Committee for approval, and now, nearly 7 years later, we are looking at another phase of development within the Mare Valley, which is simply a rehash of an earlier application which was refused, as has been touched on just earlier today. As members and officers can see, local feeling hasn't changed, nor has the planning policy, since this proposal lies within what is seen to be the open countryside and is not in the current local plan from which we have to work with. I feel that this proposal will not help the countryside, as the report itself says at page 41, where it says the proposals have a potential to impact on the AONB, i.e. a partial erosion, as was discussed by Mr. Freeman earlier today. I do not share the confidence of the report at page 43 that the site will benefit from a net gain. What we are witnessing is a creeping infill of housing which is against Strategy 7 to meet targets which the government itself might change, and then all we will have done today, if we follow this recommendation, is rip up an open green space in the countryside with absolutely no benefit to the local community. Looking quickly at highway safety, there is no doubt that this site will be an issue for traffic using this access point, unless and until double yellow lines are installed, so that this will create less problems. And I remind members present that the highways access is deemed to be suitable because we are going to demolish number 76 Douglas Avenue. So I would say that there are still therefore parking issues, as well as the accidents referred to by some of the speakers today. Turning to drainage matters, I'm still not happy with the South West Water drainage works, but I'm aware that the DCC flood risk team have removed their objections as set out on page 45 of this report, and we saw the provisions today for the capture of the water, drainage water, which I think is quite reasonable. To conclude, I, like most members, agree and recognise that there is the need to provide affordable housing, which this application does. And so I'd ask through you, Chair, today, that if we as a committee are minded to grant planning permission, we try where we can to stick to policy and ask for this site to provide almost the 50% affordable, as referenced at page 39 of our report. I personally am not very happy with the fact that the situation is that they have been allowed to offer 25%, when clearly they have Mr. Lester has just said that housing is a very great important matter, and I would argue if it is such a great matter, then they should be in a position to increase the percentage of affordable housing, and certainly that works for me. But if it doesn't work for the applicant, or it can't be achieved for whatever reason, then as I see it, we have no choice but to refuse this application today on the grounds that the countryside is being eroded in defiance of the existing local plan, as we've discussed earlier, with no tangible benefit for the local community in return. Exmouth already has Plum Park, and soon it will have Goodmoors, which I feel is enough for the present, until companies like South West Water make a great effort to sort out the drainage and we get proper infrastructure in place to cope. I will now wait to hear what other members present think, Chair, and thank you so much for the time to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Desarum. I think Devon County Council are the body who will decide whether there would be double yellows, as explained by Mr. Freeman this morning. Mr. Freeman, would you like to explain further about the affordable housing?
Yes, I mean, just to add in terms of the other thing that occurred to me after the site inspection was obviously under the highway code, if they create a T-junction into that site, then under the highway code people shouldn't be parking close to that junction. Excuse me. In any event, whether there's double yellow lines there or not under the highway code, so the visibility space should be clear of parked vehicles. There is obviously scope to park further up the road in each direction in any event. Sorry, what was the other issue, Chair?
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, yes. So yes, I mean, the boundary between the 25% requirement within the town and 50% requirement beyond the town is the built-up area boundary. And it comes back to this issue about how much weight can be given to that boundary in the absence of a 5-year housing land supply. The presumption in favour of sustainable development and the tilted balance that I mentioned earlier. Fundamentally, that built-up area boundary cannot be given significant weight in the current circumstances, and so sites beyond that boundary, I think we cannot really insist that they provide the 50% that's required under the policies in the local plan, because those policies cannot carry significant weight at this point in time. Hence the 25% that's been put forward. I think in officers' opinion that's a reasonable provision. I would also highlight that while the applicants have proposed 25% on the basis that that's a reasonable position given the policy position, I think given the constraints of the site in terms of its topography, I would be surprised if there were not viability issues if 50% were insisted on in any event. So I think the 25% that's on offer is reasonable given the policy position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, I'm still in questions. Would anyone like to ask any questions? Mr. John, please. No, nobody? Your microphone light's on over there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. John.
Okay, thank you.
Right, then we go to speakers, please. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving... Have I got echo here? Oh. Thank you. Oh, well, I'll just keep going. I should turn that... Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Well, this is as I said at the last meeting, is a very... I feel torn with this particular application because this is a farm where I grew up and I love the farm, and I look across to the site where we are this morning and I could nearly cry, to be honest with you, because it is that sort of feeling for me. I remember it as a farm and a working farm, and that's where my family were. But that holds no part actually in planning law and in defensive planning here today. This is a planning application that has been put forward, and it stands on its performance and the way that it's been put forward here today. I actually welcome the opportunity to go and have a site visit, because regardless of how I feel I know the land very well, actually going and having a site visit and understanding how the developments have taken place across the way over from Plum Park and looking back across to where we are, and how this site fits in, if you might want to call it fitting in within the site of the topography of the land and its appearance on the land, it does fit, actually looks to me like it fits reasonably well in there, regardless of the undulation of the land. It is on that basis that I take on board all of the evidence that's been put in front of us. And the evidence that's put in front of us seems to me, Chair, through you, is relatively overwhelming, that if we go against this application, where this application is likely to end up. It's likely to end up at appeal, and it's likely to end up that because of the lack of our housing, 5-year housing land supply, that we will lose on that basis, and it puts this particular authority, East Devon District Council's planning authority, at risk. And it's a great shame that I say that, because I feel as if it's almost like a gun to our head that our ability to refuse this application in some ways is almost but taken away from us because of the inevitability of the outcome of the consequences of the actions that we take today. That could be. So when I take on balance all of the things where we are, and bearing in mind where this land sits and where it sits, and I did notice, Madam Chair, when we went down through Douglas Avenue, went further on, and you'd know this well, that the Royal College site is actually taking place, and even that site is moving, and I know that that is actually not very far from this site as well, because the lane that goes down the Royal College side, if we'd actually went down, and I'm talking about the playing fields on the Douglas Avenue there, actually, if we didn't do that, but if we'd actually seen that, you actually see that the line, a delinear line, is actually coming across on that piece of land. So it grieves me to have to say, because I would sooner it stayed as it was, and the Mare Valley is very close to my heart, but it grieves me to have to say that I am going to propose a recommendation that's been put forward by our officers. I think the recommendation that Mr. Freeman has put out, understanding the reasons for refusal that went to the planning inspector on the last time in 2016 compared to this time, has given very sound reason as to why we're in this position, why the officers have taken the stance of what they are. Also, he's actually responded to the response of which Councillor Brewster Simon has put very well forward regarding the 50% application and understanding why the 25% application of affordable homes has been presented here today and presented very eloquently in the way of objectively the outcomes of that is going to be if we do or if we don't actually go on that basis. So from my perspective, I don't see that we have any choice other than I do appreciate that we went and had a look at the site today, and I don't see that we have any choice to go forward with the recommendation that's in front of us by the officers, and that's the recommendation that I'm going to put forward in support. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I took on board all what the objector said, and I mean, I think that, you know, they have logical reasons for why they've done that. The thing that I think we're up against most is that this application, and I was chairman in actual fact when it was refused back in 2015, but that was then went to the inspector and was refused basically, well, only on the landscape problem that wasn't put forward properly. And now what has happened now, the landscape has been overcome. If we actually refuse this, then exactly the same as what Councillor Skinner said, we wouldn't stand one hope of actually doing anything about it. It would, we would probably be done for costs. Also, we wouldn't have very much say in anything because they would turn around and say, well, you know, we're going to do it as we want to rather than what we've put forward. Somebody mentioned about the plum park there. Well, I mean, in actual fact, I mean, this development, I mean, is far, the way it's set out, far superior to that of the Plum Park, because, I mean, the Plum Park looks just like one big mass of houses in there, which it is, in actual fact. And with regard to, it was mentioned with regard to the surface water, that's what the attenuation pond is for at the bottom there, to actually deal with all the surplus water on this site. And therefore, I mean, I feel very, very sorry for those that lived there. I mean, in actual fact, I mean, I said when we were there, the house that faces right opposite that 76, is it, will have a far better view across the valley than it has looking at that partially derelict house that is there now. And so therefore, sadly, I think, you know, we've got a big problem here that if it went to appeal, we wouldn't stand a hope, because the only thing that was declined on or upheld on was the actual landscape, and that seems to be overcome. And so if an inspector was involved now, that would be, you know, money down the drain if we were actually applied for costs for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gee.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank the officers and other members for the site visit this morning. It was very useful. I didn't know the site before, but having seen it, I can understand why the local residents are against having done what is planned. And I know we have this problem with the 5-year housing land supply, but are we going to be held to ransom every time a planning application comes up because of the 5-year housing land supply? Or are we going to stand up and say, no, we don't want this, these are the reasons why we don't want it, and we go forward from there? One thing that did come to me this morning was, considering the appalling state of affairs regarding South West Water, particularly in Exmouth, I think they should give us a detailed report of how they plan to treat the sewage. I know the surface water drainage is going to be dealt with, but something that they can't do that at the moment, and the fact that they failed to even turn up at our meeting just reinforces the contempt they have towards council officers and this committee. It happens all the time. South West Water don't turn up, they don't do anything. We have already seen areas in the country where tourism has suffered as a result of sewage in the sea, and this will happen in Exmouth, well, it's already happening in Exmouth, if we don't take firm action. Mr. John talks about no substantial harm. This
plan and others like it is suicidal for Exmouth if South West Water don't get their act together. And I think as a committee we should ask them to come before us and tell us what their plans are going forward, because at the moment we don't have anything and they're going to ruin Exmouth for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I have to agree, you know, I have every sympathy with the residents. I remember this before many of the houses in Douglas Avenue were even built. And that area was known as the Path Fields, and it was all farmland. But people have to have somewhere to live, and we are, as one of the objectors said, we are on thin ice. That was said last time because of the 5-year land supply, and that will be a fallback for developers, of course. Now, are there any other speakers, please? Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's. I totally agree with Councillor Lawrence. It does feel as though we've got a gun to our heads with the lack of a 5-year housing land supply. Unfortunately, we've heard a lot from the objectors this morning about the lack of infrastructure in Exmouth, the issues with South West Water, and those are all absolutely key to development in Exmouth. Unfortunately, they're not planning matters, or at least not something we have jurisdiction over. We've heard a lot about the highways, but DCC highways have offered no objection, so we really are in a bit of a difficult position here. However, it has been stated time and time again that we should be allowing sustainable development, and I want to take issue with the sustainability credentials of this development. It's on a bus route. It is. The number 7 bus goes along that road every hour. It starts at 9 and it stops at 5. So if you want to go somewhere in the evening by bus, you're going to have to get over to Salterton Road. Not a million miles away, but all the schools are across Salterton Road. There's a small number of shops at Littleham Cross, but they are quite a small number. There is a small co-op, but schools are all going to be on the other side of Salterton Road and at least a couple of kilometres away. Walkable in theory, but in practice, faced with that hill, I suspect a lot of people are going to get in the car and grind up the hill to get out onto Salterton, onto Douglas Avenue, and from there onto Salterton Road. So I'm having trouble seeing this as seriously a place that is going to encourage active travel, or people to live actually sustainably. I suspect it will end up leading to further heavy car use, and you can see from the indicative layout that it's all predicated on the car. There's no cycleways there. There has been talk of a pedestrian access through to Plum Park, but I'm not quite sure where it would go after that. So I do have some issues with the sustainability credentials of the site. The layout itself I don't object to. I quite like the green belt through the middle, and this is only indicative at this stage. That will come back under reserved matters and we can comment on the layout then. The access I think is a problem, but it's very difficult to argue against it when highways haven't objected to it, and I do recognise that it is quite a steep access there, but I think we have got difficulty in objecting to this. I think we're on thin ice, but I'm going to reserve my position for a minute or two and see if anybody else has anything to say.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Freeman to indicate where the public open space is, please? There's been mentioned that there was none planned, but there is, I believe.
There is some, yes. It's indicated on this plan. If you can see my cursor, but there is an area of open space here. There's obviously this belt of planting that Councillor Davies just mentioned through here. But this is the informal open space in this area here. There are proposals, I think there's indications of footpath links through potentially to Plum Park through here. There is already the footpath that runs down the bottom of the site through here. There are obviously further informal and formal play areas for young children within the Plum Park development as well, within walking distance.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Right. Would anyone else like to speak? No hands raised. Over to you, Mr. Hunter, to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. So at the moment we've got a proposal by Councillor Skinner in line with officer recommendation, seconded by Councillor Key. Number 1, to adopt the appropriate assessment, and number 2, to approve the application subject to a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
There was, Chair, Mr. Freeman put in, suggested another condition to add to that.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, apologies, Chair. There was an amendment to condition 9.
Yeah.
So would ask if members could give, in the event that members are minded to grant permission, that they give delegated authority to myself in consultation with yourself, Chair, and the ward members to amend condition 9 to ensure that it includes the words, notwithstanding the submitted details, there should be no discharge of surface water into the combined sewer. This is to help to address the concerns raised in terms of the sewage issues and the comments from South West Water. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do you want us to go to the vote?
Yes, please. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much for clarifying that, Ed. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. So we go to the vote then, members. All those in favour of the recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in support.
Those against?
1 against.
And abstentions?
2 abstentions.
3, I think there were.
3 abstentions. Apologies. So
Thank
that
you.
is recommended for approval.
Thank you. I'd like to thank members of the public and the agent for coming along. I know it's not the result that you wanted, but I'm afraid we'd be on a hiding to nothing if we'd refused this. There are no grounds. Thank you. Right, now we move on to agenda item 9. Planning application 220783, Major Full, land to the east of Rutton Farm, Roll Lane, Wimple, pages 55 to 130. Mr. Freeman. All right, we'll hold on for a minute for the evacuation to take place.
Chair, could I just remind you that I'm actually a ward member for this application as well?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You've got that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Freeman, would you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this application was for a solar farm development and related infrastructure located approximately 800 metres to the northwest. So the infrastructure, the substation and connection point is just up here, about 100 metres from the main site. This application was considered at your previous meeting and deferred for site inspection to consider the landscape impacts of the development. And members will be aware we, for the benefit of the public, we went out to the site and we walked a section of the public footpath that runs along this part of the site and up through here, and had a good look into the site from the main public viewpoints from that footpath and also from the road on the way back. Yeah, so members will recall that we walked along here, we had a look at the views into fields 13, 16, 17, and then up to here into 19 and 20 in particular. So members will have seen from the site inspection that northern part of the site in particular is quite self-contained. The field boundaries are quite strong, mature hedgerows and trees along those boundaries. And really, while there are glimpsed views through gateways into the site, as a whole, the footpath is very well screened. I think members would agree from the site inspection we did and into that area. That area of the site is, the northern part of the site is also very flat. and when viewed from the wider landscape, there are very few visual receptors in terms of views into the site, and this area of the site is not really viewed in the context of the Peridon Farm solar farm site, which is that to the north, which members granted permission for last year. In terms of the southern part of the site, it was clear, I think, from the site inspection that there are a number of views in to the southern part of the site, particularly into fields 1, 3 and 4 from the main road, the road that runs from Wimpole to Tallerton. I keep getting picked up on using the word main. Relatively main compared to some of the others we drove this morning, that links Tallerton and Wimpole. Again, those are views through gateways, fundamentally. The hedgerows in those areas are, again, quite mature and well maintained. So I'll take you to the photographs of that part of the site, which are the early ones. You can see that there are glimpsed views. So this is coming over the railway bridge, and you can see into the site in here, and also from the road. There are sections where the hedge is a bit lower, and there are views into the site, and likewise. However, these views, in officers' opinion, are quite limited. They are from cars or any pedestrians who stop at the gateways, and potentially to a limited extent from users of the railway line who will get glimpsed views, but going through at high speed, those views would be for a brief period of time. So we feel that in landscape terms, overall, the landscape impact is acceptable. We accept that this lower part of the site is a little bit more visible, and that the density of panels within the site and their height is slightly higher than we've seen on other solar farms in the area. Having said that, the majority of the site, particularly the northern part that we saw on site, is very well screened and very self-contained, which further limits its landscape impact. And it would not be read in the context of other solar farms in the area to have a significant cumulative impact. To just pick up on some of the other issues that are relevant to this application, I think there have been concerns expressed about the loss of agricultural land, and as is detailed in the report, 13.8% of the site would be grade 3A agricultural land. That's mainly small parcels of land to the northern part of the site that we saw on site. I think the whole of the site is largely laid to grass, other than I think we saw one field down by the roadside that had some sheep within it. But the majority of the site, particularly the northern part of the site, which is the higher grade land, is simply laid to grass and clearly has been for many years. So those pockets of fields which are of higher grade land have limited potential to be brought into use for growing crops, given that they are small parts of wider sites, wider fields of lower quality land, and so we feel that the loss in this case is relatively small and less significant in terms of our stock of high grade agricultural land. And you'll note that Natural England have commented on this issue as well in their response and not raised concerns other than to protect the soil resources through conditions which are incorporated within the recommendation. Other issues that have been raised relate to the access arrangements to the site. We drove the route of the construction traffic from the A30 at Daisy Mount into the site, so members would have seen from themselves the quality of the roads through that area. Obviously, they do get quite rural towards the site itself, as is perhaps inevitable for any solar farm, and no doubt there will be some disruption during the construction works. I would say that I don't think that is any more than any other solar farm in the countryside would create in terms of those issues. And so I think we would struggle to maintain a refusal on those grounds, particularly in the face of there being no objection on that basis from the Highway Authority. You'll see also that within the recommendation is a recommendation for the submission of a KEMP, or Construction Environmental Management Plan, to coordinate and understand those issues better and how we can minimise disruption arising from the development. In terms of the landscaping proposal, you heard on site that there's lots of details in the application in terms of enhancing hedgerows within the site and improved planting. This all leads to significant benefit, 21.65% net gain in habitats. overall across the site, and much greater benefit, 44% in terms of specific hedgerow biodiversity. So there's significant biodiversity net gain through this development as a result of the landscaping that's designed to minimise its landscape impact. So taking all of these issues into account, as officers, we feel that this development is acceptable in terms of its landscape, highways and other issues. The other key issue I think to consider with this application is obviously we have to accept that we are in a climate change emergency. And this council declared a climate change emergency a couple of years ago. There is a real need to provide more renewable energy, and to do that, solar farms have a significant part to play in terms of achieving that. They will inevitably, wherever they go, have some impact on the landscape, and cause some of the other issues that I know raise concerns in terms of this application. I think in our experience looking at these sites and looking at other proposals like this we've seen elsewhere in the district, that this site is about as well screened and self-contained as any we have seen in terms of its landscape impact. And so we really think that we would struggle to sustain grounds for objecting to this application, and therefore the recommendation is to approve as detailed in the report and subject to the conditions within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank members and officers who went on that safari this morning. It was a little difficult, shall we say, challenging. I don't know what I'd rather do, that or the London Marathon, frankly. Anyway, we go to the objectors. Andrew Bratt, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Bratt.
Thank you. Thank you for going and looking at this at least this morning. Thank you. Your landscape officer has advanced serious reservations about this particular solar farm scheme, the necessity for 15,000 tonnes of crushed stone at the site, concreting in of fence posts, density of panels, and the lack of habitat enhancement compared to other schemes. But in particular, he requested you remove panels from the skyline of Field 4, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Can I ask you to look at the 2 photos we sent you, because apparently you can't show them here. Our screen grab of the applicant's own photo visualisation shows the vast array of panels in Field 4 from a considerable distance. We also sent you a photo taken from the road, our main road, of that field with sheep on the horizon. Now the sheep are 70 centimetres high at the rump. The panels at 2.7 metres are 4 times the height of a sheep. There will be nothing behind. It will be panels. They'll completely obscure the skyline. You can't see it from the photos you're being shown, but you could see it from the photos we sent you. Whereas the rest of the site, I agree, can be screened off from our community to a fairly good extent, Field 4 will effectively be a 300-metre long advertisement for it, dominating the skyline between our 2 communities of Wimple and Tallerton. You all know Para 174B of the MPPF states that planning decisions should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment by recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. This wouldn't. Devon's Landscape Policy Group has issued advice on accommodating solar in the countryside, and the following are taken from their advice notes. And you've got to ask, does Field 4 do this? Quote, consider views from popular routes. Site panels in areas where they can be well concealed or integrated. Quote, the more visible a development is in the landscape, the higher the risk that it will affect scenic quality and natural beauty. Quote, minimise the height of the panels so that they will be as unobtrusive as possible. In areas with Devon hedges, aim to site them below the height of the hedge. Field 4 does none of that. Where else in Devon have you seen an array of panels that would dominate the skyline like this? And that photo doesn't show it. On the 24th of March, East Devon issued their residents' update and heralded their public health implementation plan for 23 and 24. One strand is countryside and leisure, and its stated aim is to provide a beautiful natural environment that conserves and protects East Devon's outstanding wildlife habitats and landscapes. It doesn't say except in Wimple and Tallerton. Your landscape officer has tried to get something done about Field 4, but the applicant has refused. In the end, the planning officer has decided to recommend you approve the scheme, but admits the situation along the Wimple to Tallerton Road is a harm, albeit he calls it a small harm. What is a small harm? Is it like a white lie, or is it like turning a blind eye?
Time, sorry.
I nearly finished. I urge you not to venture down that path. The applicant is insisting on generating the maximum financial profit from the site, 49.9 megawatts and nothing less. We shouldn't be bludgeoned into delivering what the applicant insists on at the expense of those planning principles.
Thank you,
Nearly
Mr.
finished.
Bratt.
There was room for compromise here, and this applicant hasn't listened to local concerns or your own officials. So please reject the application as it stands.
Thank you. Neil Bullen, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Bullen. No.
So I'm definitely not against a solar farm in this area, but comparing this application with local existing and forthcoming developments, Horton rates very poorly. 3 instances of this are this: their insistence on retaining Field 4 against recommendations of Landscape Officer and NPPF guidelines. They have made minimal provision for biodiversity measures, and the proposed density of panels will cause potential for land degradation and habitat loss, purely to make extra profit. Their insistence on concreting in thousands of fence posts and using vast quantities of crushed stone for just building the site. This will produce unnecessary carbon costs, along with large disruptions to the very inadequate roads and the local community. It was quite avoidable. Section 534 of the NPS for energy states all proposals for energy infrastructure projects should include a carbon assessment as part of their environment statement. I don't understand why this hasn't been done. My other main point is the fallacy that Aura repeat regarding the potential for worthwhile grazing to continue under and around the panels. They quote in their latest document, in glowing terms, a study from Oregon University, how solar panels there enhance grass production and provide beneficial shelter for the sheep. This led, they said, to twice as much grass produced under the panels compared to the bare fields. It may interest you to know that this test was carried out at a latitude of 44.5 degrees. Exeter is further north at 50 degrees. A much closer comparison to Oregon would be Monaco on the French Riviera. A second slight difference is that Oregon has an average of 2,340 hours of sun per year. The UK only 1,400. Another unmentioned fact of this study is the density of the panels. In the study, the panels are smaller and lower, allowing more sunlight to reach the ground, and the ratio of panels to grass is about 50%. Comparing to this proposal at over 80%. And perhaps I should point out here that all the panels taken out from Field 5 appear to have been squeezed into the other fields, packing them tighter still. Aura also reference a farm in South Wales where a solar development was started a few years ago. They say it is working well with grazing by sheep, and that the panel spacing is similar to that at Horton. What they don't say is that, by my calculation, looking at the site on Google Earth, the density ratio of panels to exposed ground is still only about 50%. I have 2 interesting quotes from this farmer. When a solar park is set up, farming isn't a priority for the energy company. They design it to get the highest possible number of panels on the land.
3 minutes.
No
Mr.
surprise
Boland.
there, but what perhaps is more telling is this, what they said. It is not possible to reseed the land, so there will be a nutritional penalty going forward, and the shade from the panels diminishes the sugar content of the sward. This is after less than 10 years. Is that really the best evidence that Aura can produce? This particular proposal is focused on maximising profit at the expense of the soil, biodiversity, the local population and the character of this part of East Devon. It could have been so different. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Jonathan Bowles, please. You had 3 minutes.
Nigel, sorry. I beg your pardon, excuse me. Different Nigel.
I have 4 points I'd like to make. The first one is NIMBYism. This is not NIMBYism. The truth is that I and many others have strong and valid concerns at the scale, density and cumulative impact of the multiple schemes that are proposed or approved for this small area. I support solar in East Devon. Indeed, I have it on my own farm buildings. The reality of the problem that you now have to deal with is that the developer of these schemes have patently failed to talk to each other and consider jointly with East Devon how the demand for solar can be aligned with the available connections and the responsibility not to ruin such a condensed area. Instead, they are all individually pushing their own schemes to the maximum and blow the consequences for the environment and the people who have to live with it for the next 40 years. Number 2, to what extent can East Devon take into account the other nearby schemes? Mr. Freeman seems to be of the opinion that each scheme needs to be assessed individually. I would respectfully argue that the ministerial response from the Department of Levelling Up that I referred to in my previous submission suggests he is incorrect. If in doubt, why not ask them? Why does the scheme need to be of this size? Aura Power are working on a number of much smaller schemes. In these post-subsidy days, many approved schemes of between 20 to 30 megawatts provide adequate return for the investors. In the case of Horton, this could mean losing less than 100 acres of productive farmland rather than 150 acres. They could easily lose fields 1 to 8, the bottom right-hand corner of that diagram, which would hugely reduce the visual impact from the road and from the footpath to Westcott. Why not tell them that in view of the other nearby schemes, this size has to be reduced by 30% before you grant approval? Why does it have to be exactly as they have proposed? My final point, is the level of community fund really sufficient if the scheme is consented? Although Mr. Freeman again said the community fund is not a planning matter, I would argue that it would be negligent of East Devon if they did not take the opportunity to maximise the benefit that was made available to the impacted communities. Aura's proposed offer of £20,000 per annum is wholly insufficient. This solar farm, at 50 megawatts, will generate about 8 million of annual revenue. I'll finish with some questions for you. If you decide to approve the current scheme without any changes, at what point will you decide that enough is enough? East Devon does not have a strategy on this. And how long after the horse has bolted is it going to take you to get one? The developers are trying to force these decisions through because they realise that if a joined-up strategy was adopted, their individual schemes would either be refused or substantially reduced in size, impacting their return on selling the consented project. Horton approval would mean 450 acres in the immediate Clyst Valley has either been approved by East Devon or Mid Devon. Do you then approve Escott when it comes? Or Marsh Green when it goes to appeal? And what about the sixth one? The one that unsuccessfully asked me if I would put 100 acres of my farm into it. You have much to consider, but don't be rushed or bullied into making the wrong decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. And this committee will not be rushed or bullied, I can assure you of that. And also, when it comes to strategy, you know that solar farms have become much more significant as a form of renewable energy since our local plan was adopted in 2016. Things have moved on considerably, and we are looking at that to include in our new local plan as it proceeds. Now, Mr. Freeman, would you like to respond to any of the comments made, which were somewhat critical of you, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Water off a duck's back. But yeah, I mean, I suppose pick up on your point, Chair. Yeah, we are looking at this through the new local plan and how we can strengthen our policy position in terms of these applications. But we have to consider this application on the policy position as it stands today. The other thing I'd say, I think a lot of the speakers so far have spoken with regard to these fields at the bottom of the site, 1 to 8, I think the last speaker mentioned. The previous one was particularly in relation to number 4. I have no doubt that they're right, that if those fields were removed from the scheme, it would be a much better scheme and much less harmful in terms of the landscape. We have to consider the application that's before you today, and we have to consider the application as a whole. There are some fields that are more harmful than others in terms of the landscape. My point was that the lower part of the sites along the road from Wimple to Tallerton, will be fairly significant views into the site from the gateways in those locations. But those are relatively small windows in which those views are obtained, and they're not views that are obtained in terms of the wider landscape. And so that harm has to be balanced against the wider benefits of the scheme, what it delivers in terms of renewable energy, and the fact that the vast majority of the site is very well concealed within the landscape. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, Nigel Richards, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Richards.
Thank you very much. Starting now. There are 4 objections I'd like you... Is this on? Yes. 4 objections I'd like you to consider before you vote. 2 relate to road safety and congestion. All the detail is on the website with footage of the route, but you've actually done it this morning, so that's fine. And there's a dramatic image of the incident when a badly backed up HGV Arctic closed that route for a month. I hope you've had a chance to see the images on the planning site. First is the access route from Fairmile to the site, which is 2.8 miles, and it's the only route there and back. Many places where 2 cars can't pass, let alone 2 HGVs. At peak, there'll be 54 movements of 40-ton vehicles per weekday. That's on page 41 of the Engina report. Many Arctics are 54 feet long, and they'll have to back up. You've seen what that can do. Every one of the 2,376 HGV movements will cross 3 bridges over the main Exeter to Waterloo line. Each bridge will suffer an unprecedented loading and intensity. If any inherent structural weaknesses are made worse, remedial costs are likely to be borne by EDDC if the application goes ahead without an independent structural survey. The disruption and huge costs caused by suspension of this key rail link and the road closures would be borne by the people you serve. 3. Can the substation actually cope with the proposed generation of 49.9 megawatts without expansion? Trago Mills found their massive solar power investment could not be handled. What a waste! A definitive statement from National Grid as a precondition would resolve the question, which has been raised by at least one of your committee members. 4. The cost of decommissioning in 40 years' time will be massive. A minimum of about 2,400 HGV loads, plus site labour, plus labour for the toxic landfill costs. Can the applicant guarantee it will be here in 4 years' time, or whomever it sells it on to? Can it guarantee its successor, it or a successor in title, will have the resources to fund the reinstatements? Chances are it will end up as 58 hectares of unusable land, as the refurb cost could not be justified by agricultural returns. So, will it end up as housing? Is that the legacy you want to leave our grandchildren? An answer could be a precondition for the applicant to lodge the full current refurb cost with East Devon solicitors. Otherwise, decommissioning can't be guaranteed, and housing is the most likely result.
That's 3 minutes.
Please turn this down. Thank you. That was pretty close.
Perfectly timed, thank you. Now the supporter, Keith Hoskin, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Hoskin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Keith Hoskin. I've owned Rutton Farm since 2009. I think this gives me a degree of knowledge as to the quality of the land and its suitability for sustaining both crops and grazing. The land is used for silage production in the summer season and winter for sheep keep. The grain retains so much water that winter conditions permit only sheep keep, as the soil is very heavy clay. Conversely, in the summer the grain dries out so hard that arable production is not suitable except for a small area where the maize is grown. At a recent planning committee, several comments were made by some councillors that need to be addressed, as there were comments made without any substance or evidence to support them. And it is important that truthful, factual and accurate information is heard by all of the committee, the decision makers involved in today's planning outcome. Grass can and does grow under solar panels. We can produce photos of that. The comment made by one councillor that grass can't grow underneath and around PV cells is absolutely not factual. Sheep can and do graze underneath and around the panels. We have numerous photos that sustain that, you can see that. Having spoken to a number of other landowners that have solar farms, it is completely evident that sheep and lambs do graze under and around panels. There is nothing to suggest otherwise. Not one farmer or landowner stated that they had any issues with such grazing styles. The NFU research, and this is a quote, 95% of a field utilised for solar panels is still accessible for vegetation growth and can still support agricultural activity as well as wildlife. The most common practice is likely to be sheep and the finishing of young lambs for market, plus many farmers are using solar panels for free-range poultry, turkeys, geese, etc. It was also inaccurately stated that this grade of soil can simply be dramatically improved in a short period of time. It's completely unrealistic. This is very heavy clay soil, otherwise all farmers would be on grade 1 and 2 soil, not 3+. The land will still produce grass as it always has done. Sheep will still graze here as always, both for summer and winter, as the panels offer good shelter to the sheep throughout the year. This additional use of the land with solar panels is for a controlled period of time, not lost from productive use. Horton Solar Farm is predominantly unseen from the majority of neighbouring properties and the public highway. A new orchard will be planted along the footpath for users to enjoy. Planning officers have taken the time to review this application at considerable length, and their advice to support this scale of development and its location does not come without a very thorough investigation. Hence their 75-page planning report that which you all have, given a full recommendation for approval. The government directive is clearly to support this size and scale of solar farm. Quick summary: clean, green, electric, 800,000 to the local parishes, 3.2 million in rates. What's not to like?
Thank you, Mr. Hoskin. Now there's representation from Kerry Ehrenberg. Wendy, to read out, please.
Yeah, the short statement reads as follows. As a resident of East Devon, I am so excited about this opportunity for such a varied and valuable contribution towards our community's needs and the fight against the environmental devastation unmitigated climate change threatens us all with. The prospects of another solar farm is so uplifting in terms of fostering the hope that there will be a way forward if we prepare to change, innovate and invest. I sincerely hope that you will be bold and pass this application so that East Devon can hold its head a little higher.
Thank you. Mr. Wilyman, George Wilyman,
Yeah, hi again.
you had 3 minutes.
Hi all. My name's George Wylam and I'm the head of planning for the applicant Aura Power. At the committee meeting on 28th of March, I presented to you the overwhelming need and support for solar development and the extensive public benefits that will result. The need case continues to grow, with a vast extent of announcements published on the 30th of March during the Energy Security Day. In this speech, I intend to talk you through the various points of discussion which have been touched upon already, but also that were raised at the last meeting. So in support of the application, we've already provided a detailed account of our site selection process. This process is in accordance with both planning policy and also guidance. We've demonstrated a clear need for the use of agricultural land and ensure that the development uses predominantly subgrade 3B and 4 agricultural land, which is not best and most versatile. The area of Horton Solar Farm represents only 0.09% of all agricultural land in East Devon. All solar development, which is awaiting a decision, approved but not built, and in operation, only equates to 0.67% of all agricultural land in East Devon, so significantly less than 1%, 1% at the moment. Furthermore, majority of the site is currently in grazing use and sheep grazing will continue during the operation development. There's a growing body of research which confirms the acceptability of grazing sheep at solar farms. Recent studies have confirmed the co-location of panels and sheep is advantageous. The panels offer protection to the sheep from the weather, whilst during drier summer months, panel shading reduces scorching of grass. This increases water efficiency and assists in maintaining higher soil moisture. A case study in October 2022 edition of Farmers Weekly, which has been documented already, documents how a farm in South Wales continues to successfully graze land following development of a 50 megawatt solar farm. As confirmed during the March meeting, we discussed the application at great lengths with Council's landscape officer, and following their request, we've reduced the panel heights in field 4. We amended the application to reduce the panel heights from 3 metres to 2.7 metres across the entirety of the site. We've discussed this matter with your planning officers, and it's something we'd be open to accepting a condition on. This is on top of already removing all panels from field 5. Mr. Bratt talked about comments from the landscape officer. These are comments from November 2022. The officer stated panels should be removed from the high point of field 4 or panel heights reduced. We did the latter. In summary, the national and local need for the proposed development and the public benefits it will deliver are overwhelmingly clear. We have agreed a grid connection of 49.9 megawatts, and through a thorough site selection process, we have identified a highly sustainable and available development site. We've ensured that the design of the scheme is sensitive to the existing site features and surrounding area. We've also worked proactively with your officers and other statutory consultees who have recommended that the planning permission is granted. Just to touch on a point about decommissioning that was raised previously, there's a condition to be attached to the permission which would allow for decommissioning, which would allow details of decommissioning need to be agreed with the council. And in addition to that, there is a private bond set up with the landowners, which would allow them to draw down from it if the site was left vacant.
That's 3 minutes.
So it just leaves me to say thank you for your time, and I hope you will follow the recommendation of your officers.
Thank you, Mr. Wilyman. Right, now we go to the ward members. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the race is on, isn't it? We know that there's a limited capacity at Broadclist at the substation, and every man and his dog wants to put in a solar farm before everybody else. There's no rhyme nor reason as to why one site is better than any other site. And certainly that this idea about sheep grazing and everything, that's not a planning consideration. Everybody keeps on about, put your sheep in there and everything else. That's got nothing to do with planning at all. What has got to do with planning is the route which we all went on this morning, which I think everybody found that, when you've got something like a 54-foot lorry every 12 minutes going along that route. I mean, we met one lorry this morning and it caused so much disruption, it was unbelievable. The applicant says it might cause some disruption. It's going to cause more than some disruption. It's going to cause a huge amount of disruption. And there are a number of other things which I wanted to raise. One is at the last meeting, I challenged the land classification. Mr. Freeman said that the council couldn't have the resources to check on this. But I think that when these come up, we do need to check the land quality. I mean, we know that there are areas of 3A land there, and if we're going to have to rely on what the applicant gives us, which is land quality is a very subjective item, and the people that are working on it for the applicant are obviously going to give it the best viewpoint from the applicant. But I just think that there's a lot to be said for us having our own survey done to let us know ourselves that we've got an independent report. Now, I also have done a little bit of research on this idea of carbon assessment. We were told that it wasn't necessary to have a whole life carbon assessment, and it should have to show that the steps that have been taken to drive down climate change, the measurement of embodied carbon, how the reduction in energy demand and consumption during the operation has been prioritised, and also that we have to have a consideration of not only just the building of the site, but also the decommissioning and how much carbon is involved in that, to give us a true assessment of how much carbon we're going to save by having solar panels. And these come from the National Policy Statement for Energy, EN1, items 4.2 and 5.3. And I think until we get this information, I think we should at least put this application on hold. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner, did you say you're the other ward member, or is it?
No, I am the ward member, because this land that fits in is actually it's in my parish. Can I ask a question, please, Mr. Freeman? Something that is, I mean, as a ward member, coming on the track from Fairmile Inn all the way to the site is all through my ward. The whole track is in Tallerton and in Tallerton Ward. And the people within that particular tract of land and further afield are aghast as to how this is actually going to take place. Now, I do understand what Mr. Freeman said earlier, if we're going to have solar farms, this amount of vehicle movement is going to be the same amount of vehicle movement wherever they are, because it's the scale of the solar farms and they're all 49.9 megawatt and all the rest of it. So I get all of that. But there are several things, and you'll know, Mr. Freeman, that I've been not against solar farms. I don't think there's anybody here against solar farms. It's a proliferation of so many solar farms coming into one patch, and we all know why. It's because of the Broadcliff substation. So there's a ring around, if you mind to have it, that within striking distance of the Broadcliff substation, that there's an element of let's try between this company and others, and that's their business, that's what they do. I don't knock them for that. But they're trying to, if you like, as Councillor Lawrence quite said, first past the post, because our planning system works on the basis we treat application on its own merit. The problem is, by treating something like this on its own merit, it's a commercial business in the countryside. And they're proliferating at a rate that whereby we've got 500 acres, 1,000 acres, 1,500 acres. At what point, and this has always been my bugbear from day one, at what point do we as a planning authority say this is too much? Because from my perspective, we should have been asking that question from day one to ensure, almost like if you mind to have it, a call for sites to see how much where we land. We always start from the wrong place. We should understand how much power is going to go to that site from solar farms and work back from there as to the best place that they could possibly fit in the countryside in the best way. There was a question put by one of the Mr. Andrew Bratt, and he did make a very relevant point, so Mr. Bowles as well, regarding Field 4, but also taking the point is, the question I want to ask Mr. Freeman is taking the point that there are many aspects of this site that are very workable from a solar panels. I get that, We went on the farm, and it was actually really good to go to that farm visit actually this morning, and I hope members all agreed that it was really worthwhile, because it was. And this site sits in a really good site as far as having no visibility from anybody else. Get that, and you can't deny it. It's there, and let's not make things up as we go. We need to understand that. That's fine. But there are parts of this site that don't work quite so well within the environment at which it's sat, and we're almost left a choice. Instead of being in a position to be able to say, if through a negotiation, if there was a deferment or whatever, and this is the question I'm going to ask you, Mr. Freeman, that is there a road or a path of deferment that allows us as members to be able to discuss what we consider some of the fields that may not be suitable for us, or are we literally left with, we either like this scheme as it is, or we don't? Because I think there are elements to this scheme that in itself it actually would work very well. And I'm not wholly against the scheme. But I am against all of the scheme the way it's set out. And therefore it's on that basis that what I'm trying to do is get that equilibrium whereby we could come up with something good, but this just doesn't quite fit it. And I feel the only place we're left in is yes or no. That's it. And really, it would be a disappointment to me, because much of this site would actually work and could be a yes, but not as it's set out. So my question to you, Mr. Freeman, is going to be, could we have a deferment? Could there be a sit around the table with the applicant and talk about the parts of the scheme that would or wouldn't work? And could we come to that place? And can we do that? Is that within our remit in this planning authority to be able to do that here today? Because if it is, that's a recommendation that I would like to move to.
Before Mr. Freeman replies, can I say we've already had a deferral for today's site visit, and the applicant could very well go to appeal for non-determination. So we have to bear that in mind. But Mr. Freeman, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, ordinarily, my view would be that members need to consider the proposal that's before them today. I suppose where this development is slightly unusual is that it's not like we're talking about a building where we're saying you need to amend the design or something like that. The fields on the screen are clearly numbered. And, you know, if there are particular fields that members feel make this unacceptable overall, then I'm happy to have that conversation with the developers. Obviously, it would be for the committee to vote on a motion to defer, but deferral is obviously within the outcomes that members are entitled to put forward as a motion and vote on. Where I would urge caution, though, is that members... Well, Councillor Skinner has already acknowledged that there are large parts of this site that are fundamentally acceptable in landscape terms. And I think this is where you need to weigh up the benefits of the scheme overall. There are certainly elements of the scheme that are more visible than others. And I do fully understand the views that have been made by the residents speaking, and I don't disagree that the scheme would be better if those fields were removed. But my advice would be, I think the scheme overall is acceptable as it stands, and I think we would struggle on appeal to defend a refusal on the basis of the couple of fields that are more harmful, given relatively limited short-term views from a road in a relatively narrow viewpoint where there are no wider landscape impacts, because solar farms inevitably are going to be visible from some viewpoints. I don't think you can work on the basis of hiding these completely within the landscape.
Could I just, for clarification, Chair, the position I was trying to take was not a refusal, it was a deferral. There's a big difference, because if there was a deferral, it won't go to the planning inspectorate, because there would be no need for it to happen, because the applicant would actually agree to a deferral on the basis of a negotiation.
Well, as the chair has highlighted, they would have the right to appeal against non-determination if that was their right. So you do take that risk if they're not happy to have that negotiation and deferral. It may be that this is more of a question you want to ask the applicant, whose planning manager, I think, spoke earlier. As
If
to
I
whether
may,
or not
please,
they
Chair,
would be.
that's the question I'd like to ask him.
Right. Mr. Wileyman?
Hello.
Mr. Wildman, how are you, sir?
Yes, very well, thank you. Good to see you again. It's a question you're asking about reducing down the size of development. We've already done that quite extensively by removing Field 5. These would.
Haven't you put the panels in that?
Sorry, is someone allowed to?
Yeah, no. Please,
So
Andrew.
we've engaged extensively. This isn't something that's just come out of nowhere. This is a scheme that's been in development before my time at Aura Power. It's been 5 years in the process of coming together, both in that point of finding the grid connection, finding the land, signing up land, going through planning. You understand that process. We submitted the application. We did extensive engagement prior to submitting the application in the first place. During the course of the application, we engaged extensively with officers, planning officers, and the landscape officer. We had 3 or 4 iterations of rounds of comments from the landscape officer, which we responded to. We've amended the scheme quite extensively as a result of that. The biggest amendment being the removal of Field 5. We've also reduced the panel heights across the site from 3 metres to 2.7 metres, which we're happy to accept a condition on. That point around negotiating further fields has now passed, and comments are correct. You know, if we're looking at a further deferral, we'll have to be looking towards appealing non-determination, just because of the length of time we've been waiting. We have an agreed grid connection. Those grid connections do expire. They're not given in perpetuity. They're given over a period of time. So we have to honour that agreement and move forward on that basis. At least going to the planning inspectorate, they would give us an answer immediately, either way.
Can I follow with a subsequent question then, please, Chair? Because it's really important I drill down to this, and because I think where we might be going to go with this. So on that basis, Mr. William, what I'd like to then ask you then is that when you say that there's a time limit with grid connection, that's what you just said, and I get that, and I understand that part. What would that time limit be that you would understand what it was at this moment in time?
So there's certain milestones you need to hit. So there's certain milestones you need to hit. So those milestones being the granting of planning permission being one of those points. Once you have that granted planning permission, you have to give it to the DNO, who's WPD in this basis. And they would confirm that that is a milestone hit, and that essentially secures your connection, and you're still in the grid order. I don't know what those exact timescales are, because that's out of my jurisdiction. I'm purely planning focused. But that is something I'd have to take back to the office and discuss with in person in relation to how far we go forward with that. But I do agree that we've discussed this application now for the best part of a year in planning, and in terms of amending the scheme further, reducing fields with panels in, that opportunity is now away from us.
If I may have a final question, Chair, as board member. So you've had discussions with our officers, you've had discussions with whoever you have at East Devon District Council, but I wasn't involved in those discussions as a ward member. Neither was my colleague involved in those discussions as a ward member. What we're asking for, if you please, what we're asking for is an opportunity for us as committee members to actually try to get behind this scheme, because we actually think it warrants part of this scheme warrants support, but there are parts of this scheme that don't. And I'm just wondering if you would give us the gravitas of having a discussion with you further through, if I can put forward a recommendation of deferral, and we can do it relatively quickly if you want to, if we can, we can go from there.
The answer is the same, unfortunately. That opportunity's gone.
Is the answer a no, sir? So as I'm clear,
the answer, we would have very been open to engaging with you.
So the answer is
this
no.
Process. We engaged extensively prior to submitting the application. We've engaged with the parish council. So my colleague sitting behind me is involved in community consultation for our company. Can I bring her in? Is that okay to talk about that process?
It's through the chair. It has to be through the chair.
What she's sort of being engaged with. I think she has engaged.
It's not a problem to me.
Yeah, come on.
It might be easier if we sort of discuss. If I hand over to Chloe.
You can share the microphone.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. So in terms of engaging with ward members, obviously we held a public exhibition, I think, the year before last, it was quite a significant time ago, we had an online webinar, we had an exhibition, you both were invited. That was the point at which, before we'd submitted a planning application, as George mentioned, the planning application has now been in determination for a year, where we've had further correspondence and liaison with the planning officers particularly. However, prior to submitting that planning application, we worked with members of the local community, Andy Bratt being one of them, Neil Bollen as well, and many other councillors, parish councillors. I met with Tallerton Parish Council, I met with Wimpole Parish Council as well, and had at length discussions. And we did amend the scheme in accordance with those comments that we initially had prior to submitting the planning application. So I think kind of re-emphasising George's point is that there has been a significant time that has elapsed that we've been able to incorporate the comments that we've received both from the local community, parish councillors and planning officers.
So the answer is no.
Can we just check this lady's
I think,
name for my notes?
Yeah, could we take your name, please?
Chloe Hood.
Chloe Hood, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
thank you. You've finished now. Councillor Pratt, please.
When we were at the site today, I had a word with Edward Freeman regarding the position regarding the sites around this particular site. Here we have 57.1 hectares, quite a large site, and in the past we've dealt with recently the Marsh Green site, which was refused. One of the reasons being because there were other sites already in place which were deemed to be too close and would have an effect on the cumulative impact on the landscape. And I believe, Edward, you did produce a plan showing other sites, and there is a possibility that this committee could decide to refuse this application on that basis. So I don't know whether that helps or hinders the matter for you.
It's up to the chair. The chair must
Yeah.
But the point is
Well-
that could be moved forward. I don't know what the other members of the committee would want to say about that point, but it was a relevant issue in regard to the Marsh Green site.
But that would have been considered, Councillor Pratt, and as you've heard Mr. Freeman say, it would be unlikely to be, the refusal would be unlikely to be supported at appeal. So I think we have to be mindful of that. Do you want to come back, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to make the point that the Marsh Green site was much closer to existing solar farms in the locality. So from there is solar farm the opposite side of the A30. There are others nearer to that site. When we were on the site, I pointed out that really in terms of the Rutton Farm application that's before you today, the nearest other solar farm is the Peridon Farm site, but due to the topography, we really don't see it in the same viewpoints, in the same. So the cumulative impact of this one in relation to that, I don't think is significant. I know there are others in the pipeline, and I understand the concerns that are being raised in terms of the cumulative impact, but I think has already been said. The planning system works on the basis of considering every application on its own merits. If this application is approved and another one comes along, then we need to assess that in terms of the cumulative impact of that in relation to this site and Peridon and any others in that area. And eventually, I'm sure we will reach a point where we will be saying the landscape can't accommodate any more of these without causing irreparable harm to the landscape and the character of the area, such that we have to start refusing them. My point in terms of this application is the cumulative impact is not significant in terms of this application in our view, such that I don't think we could sustain a reason for refusal on that basis.
Thank you. And you asked the question, you want to come back?
Yes. The point was, though, that the plan you showed me contained sites where planning
applications had been granted. These were not cases where there's something in the pipeline which has not been dealt with by the planning committee. We were dealing with cases where there were planning permissions granted for sites similar to the ones at Marsh Green.
But Mr. Freeman's already explained that there is, in his view, not a cumulative effect. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair. And just for the record, because the plan isn't on the presentation, this is the plan we're showing. So it shows the Marsh Green development here, the Horton Farm application, which is before you today here, the Perrodon Farm application that was previously approved by this committee last year, and the Langford proposal, which was allowed on appeal in Mid-Devon up here.
What scale is that on, as a matter of interest? What's the distance between those?
It's not to a recognised scale, but the distances are substantial,
Probably less
miles.
than a mile between Rutton and Perrodon, yeah.
Who's that speaking, please?
It's a member of the public, Chair.
No, I'm sorry, you've had your go. Councillor Pratt, have you finished?
Sorry, can I just object to that? Can a member of the public interject and ask a member to ask a question?
We've
been dealt with now.
done with now.
I would ask other members of the committee to see what they have to say.
Right, thank
about
you.
it.
Councillor Key next.
Yes, I wanted to ask the applicant, in actual fact, a question. It's in the agreement that there is money actually going to be put forward. And then I would like to ask Mr. Freeman, is that going to be a guaranteed amount, or is it just airy-fairy, a figure pulled out of the sky and not going to be adhered to at any one time? Can it be signed and sealed that is, the amount? Because I think it's worked out about 800,000.
The community fund is nothing to do with the planning
No.
process. We cannot give weight to that. I would rather members disregard any knowledge they have of the community fund. That is a separate matter between the developer and the community and shouldn't affect your decision as planning authority.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief comment about what Ed has said. He's absolutely right. It's not a planning consideration. And with the Perrodon one, they came up with the same idea. They were going to put so much money into the pot. And at the last minute, they pulled it out because they said it's not a planning consideration. So why should they put any money up? So, this could happen here as well. What I would like to say to the applicant is that we are here today trying to get your planning application put through in a way that helps everybody to get behind it. And what you're saying is that we can't do that because it's already passed, the time has gone. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're the person who can say the time has gone. I think we're the people who say the time has gone. And I think we are trying, between us, to try and get some information and to try to get some understanding and to try to reach a position where you get your planning permission for a particular solar farm, whether it's this one or a bit smaller or whatever, it's neither here nor there. But we are the people that represent the residents of this area, and you don't. And I'm sorry, but you don't say when the time has passed. We do. Thank you.
No, I think you're wrong there. They've made the application. It's come before us. We have to make a decision. If we don't make a decision, you've heard the applicant allude to going to the inspectorate, where doubtless, in the opinion of our professional officers, we would lose. So, Councillor Desarum.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Having been on the visit today and listened very carefully to the debate that has been emerging, it is clear that there is issues over the fields 1 to 8. And as Councillor Skinner said, if more time were to be given, then clearly accommodation from both parties could be met. But I've listened carefully and understood the reasons why we can't give more time. But I think it will be very disappointing, given the fact that we're not a million miles, as the phrase goes, from reaching a solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I think the applicant is hinting quite strongly that they've run out of road now. Councillor Skinner. No, you were first, Councillor Skinner.
Okay. what I might say is the applicant and supporting very much what Councillor Lawrence is saying, and us trying to get into a good place, is that the concept of the planning appeal as it's set today is not necessarily where it's going to be in just a month or 2 or 3's time with the levelling up bill and what the way that Mr Gove, as the Secretary of State, is intending to re-look at planning policy regarding solar farms. But having said that, please, Chair, that doesn't mean to say he's going to make it worse or make it better. It means to say there is something coming in the wind, and it may not be to the favour of the applicant. What I was trying to get to was a place that was able to negotiate ourselves through, which obviously hasn't happened, to get to a good place, because I think there is a way forward without going to appeal. But if we do end up refusing this application, we will be probably 12 months in the waiting for that to happen. So you'll be a long way down the road. So there we go. So that's that one.
Thank you, but we have to deal with this today. Councillor Brown.
Oh, no, sorry. Couldn't see round the side. If the applicant goes to appeal, it's going to take 10 months at least for an appeal. If the applicant, we're sure we can negotiate in the time between now and June, when it could come back to us and we could get this matter resolved. There's, going to appeal is 10 months. Coming back at the next meeting, where we could have everything resolved in the meantime, is June in 6 weeks' time, 7 weeks' time. It'd be far more sensible to do that than to stand a chance of going to appeal where everything could change totally.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but he's made it quite clear that there is no room for negotiation. They've spent enough time on this, and I'm not taking sides or anything. I understand what he's saying. Whether Mr Freeman has anything to say about the delay in going to appeal or the time scale in going to appeal, but it makes no difference. We've got to make a decision today, and if it goes to appeal, it's likely that we will lose.
So what I could do, Chair, is actually put forward a recommendation for deferral.
We've already had 2 deferrals.
No, we haven't.
And they will go.
And that's fine. And that's fine. They can do what they want to do. But we could still make a recommendation of deferral.
It's irresponsible.
No.
I think we're here to make decisions, not leave it to the applicant to discuss, negotiate with officers. We have to be bold today and make this decision.
And I want to make the right decision, because this is going to be for 40 years.
Yes, we're aware of that, Councillor Skinner, but please, we haven't had a proposal yet. Can we have a proposal?
Yes, for deferment.
No, we're not deferring.
You can't do that.
So, is it probably best if I do interject at this stage?
You better way.
Thank you. Chairman, obviously, if Councillor Skinner wishes to put forward a proposal for deferment, he is entitled to do so.
Yeah.
And we are entitled then to vote upon that. Obviously, we've heard the risk. The risk is quite clear that the applicant is likely to appeal for non-determination, and it may well be that they have costs against us then on that basis.
Yeah.
So that is the risk that you are taking, but you are obviously within your rights to take that risk if you wish to do so. But you've now been clearly told that that is a big risk in this case, and that if we were to try and defend this, we are likely to lose. So bear that in mind when you're making your decision and you're voting. Thank you.
So I'm putting forward a recommendation of deferral. Let's see if there's a seconder.
Right, second. Councillor Lawrence seconded.
Thank you, Chair. I've said quite a lot so far. I won't say a lot more, other than the fact that if it goes to the inspector, because we've deferred it, because we want to try and reach a good agreement, I think that perhaps it might not go totally against us. Thank you very much.
Well, that's not the view of the officers.
Can I just clarify how long you're proposing to defer for, please?
That would have to be a place where we'd have to negotiate, Mr Hunter. I don't know that I'm sat in a position here today to actually answer that question.
Mr Freeman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think before members vote on any motion to defer the application, what I would like to understand is what members would like us as officers to be negotiating with the developers. Are there particular fields that members would say that the visual impact from those fields is unacceptable and therefore they would like them removed from the scheme? Are there particular other alternatives that they would like to see in terms of reduction of density of panels in a particular field, bolstering of landscaping, so that we have an indication? The scheme that's before you is the scheme that me and my team of officers have already negotiated over many months, as the applicants have said. That's included the removal of Field 5, enhanced landscaping proposals. As you've also heard from the applicant, this proposal to reduce the height of the panels to 2.7 metres, maximum height. What else would members want us to achieve through the deferral?
Madam Chair, I think in asking me that question as the proposer, to answer that question in full would actually negate me, or you as an authority, we as an authority, to actually negotiate. Because if I actually set out what it is I want to negotiate with here today, we're showing our hand. Where I want to be is in a position whereby perhaps that the two ward members, along with the chairman and the vice chairman, are in a position to negotiate back as to where we think we are, and certainly Field 4 would be one of them. That's about as much as I would want to offer up at this point, because sat here with the actual applicant and telling him what it is the game I'm going to be playing if we get further down the road, I just need to understand where it is we're going with that. So what I might suggest, if I may through you, Chair, if I may through you, that if there was a discussion to take place between officers, the applicant, the ward members, that we could see where that goes. And let's see if we can get ourselves into a good place. But I don't think it's quite fair for me, Mr. Freeman, if you don't mind, for me to actually say what it is I'm intending to do here and now.
Okay, I understand that point, Councillor Skinner. I think a couple of points I would make. One is it should be officers who are doing the negotiating on behalf of the committee. Two, there is a risk, even if we were to include members in that discussion, that you have an election coming up, so there's no guarantee who around this table would still be here and involved to have that negotiation. So I think you do need to delegate this to officers to undertake any negotiation. Without wishing to put words into your mouth, would it be fair to say that what you are seeking is a reduction of the visual impact of the panels on the road to the southern part of the site, which runs then past railway cottages? And if it's left as vague as that, then it can be left to officers to negotiate accordingly.
What I was going to say without me moving my lips. Thank you very much.
Right. Do you want to put it forward, Damien?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Oh, Chair, even. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure exactly what you were saying about the fields there, but obviously it's a deferral to negotiate whether or not we can make the site slightly smaller, discussing the fields that you just mentioned.
Yes, my understanding is it would be a deferral to reduce the site and reduce its visual impact on the roadway to the southern part of the site.
And to be clear, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily be smaller.
Okay, so it's deferral to negotiate further reduction of the visual impact on the roadway to the southern part of the site.
That was the one. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, Damien. All those in favour?
Thank you then, Chair. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Sorry. All those in favour of that deferral.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in support of deferral.
And against?
1, 2 against.
Any abstentions?
1 abstention.
2.
2.
2 abstentions.
So that's been deferred.
And that'll be for the next planning committee to pick up at some point, presumably. Right, now we move to agenda item 10. Planning application 221761, full application, land at Venmore Farm, Woodbury, pages 131 to 152. Mrs. Ormsby.
Shall we just leave some time?
Yeah, well, they only take a minute. Well, I will.
5-minute comfort break.
Okay, because I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
In a meaningful timescale.
I won't be able to talk if I've got that.
Right, Mrs. Ormsby. Thank you.
Just 1 minute. Top's gone to stand by.
Okay, good afternoon. So this application is relates to land at Venmore Farm in Woodbury, and it is for the conversion and extension of existing buildings to create 2 residential dwellings and the construction of 6 additional dwellings with associated landscaping, infrastructure works and demolition of the existing buildings. This is the location plan that you can see. So you've got the sort of the location plan zoomed in a little bit to your left, and then there's a wider location plan that shows the red line that you can see on that plan is a proposed permissive footpath linking into an existing public right of way, and the intention of that is to provide a pedestrian route, having regard to the fact that there is no pavements on the roads that lead into the main settlement where there is access to facilities. So that is the proposed way of effectively providing a safe pedestrian route. This is an aerial view of the settlement and the application site. Just quickly get the laser pen, I think that might be it. Yeah, so here's the application site in here. This is the route that the permissive footpath is taking across to link into here. And this is obviously the main settlement of Woodbury, where there are a number of local services. This application site is outside of the development boundary of Woodbury. And what you can see is that if you were using the roads as your access route into the local centre, you would be walking along roads which are, for the most part, rural lanes without any public footpath or any street lighting. This shows the site, the existing layout on the site. Here you've got two old barns, which are to be demolished, and some additional sort of semi-industrial buildings on the site. The site is currently used as an employment commercial site, with also some outdoor storage, and the existing commercial use will be ceased at the site and that particular business relocated. This is the existing access into the site, which will be retained and reused. And these are the drawings of the existing elevations of the barns, the L-shaped barn that we saw on the plan. And this is the drawings of the existing large barn that's used currently for commercial purposes. This is the proposed site layout, and what you have here is the old agricultural barns converted into 2 residential units, the courtyard area subdivided into 2 gardens, and then these are the new build houses dotted around the site. So a larger unit here, a pair of semis in here, a unit in here, and another pair of semi-detached dwellings in here, with parking. Each dwelling would have 2 car parking, a minimum of 2 car parking spaces. And in this area here is a relocated parking that serves this dwelling here, which at the moment has its parking sort of roughly in this area. So that's the parking for them. And then here, this would remain outside of the residential land use, but is effectively a SUDS, attenuation drainage feature. And these are the elevations of the proposed unit. So this is converted barn number 1 and converted barn number 2. This one does have a front extension looking into the courtyard. And the application has been amended over its lifetime to improve the overall design and visual impact of the scheme. This is the layout footprints of units 1 and 2. This is the roof plan, and this is really just demonstrating that all the roof lights that were fronting the road have been removed to maintain some of the agricultural character of the building. These are units 3 and 4, the proposed elevations. You can see the materials are a mixture of brick, timber, and slate roof tiles. The floor plans. Unit 6. Floor plans of Unit 6. Units 7 and 8. With their floor plans, and then lastly Unit 9, which is one of the slightly larger unit. And this is the garaging. These are some of the the cross sections through. So this is looking, if you can see from the little yellow dotted here, that shows you where these cross sections, street elevations are taken. So this is from looking within the site. These are looking across to the front of plots 1 and 2, and then plots 5 and 3. So this helps to understand the scale. And this is looking end on. So what you might see if you were coming along the road and looking across to the site, and this particular unit, for example, the roof has been dropped and hit back to improve the visual impact. And this is the overall landscaping scheme. So you'll see from the officer report that in terms of matters of highways, ecology, heritage, design, etc., the scheme has been amended so that it is acceptable in all those matters. The key issue here is the principle of housing in this location. We're outside the development boundary, and therefore, obviously, we do need to consider it in the light of the tilted balance of providing additional housing. This does also would generate a affordable housing contribution of site provision of just under £230,000. So that's obviously is in the public benefit also. However, the site is, there is no safe pedestrian access using the existing roads into the local facilities. And it's the officer's view that the providing a footpath across effectively fields that links into another recreational footpath that is not got a consolidated surface, it's not lit, is not something that people will use on a regular basis in inclement weather, when it's dark, etc. And as a consequence, this development will be dependent on use of the car, and quite significantly so. And so for that reason, officers taking the view that notwithstanding the tilted balance in favour of development, notwithstanding the public benefits of additional housing and affordable housing contributions, that the adverse impacts of this unsustainable location of a car-dependent development significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of the scheme, and as such, it is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the agent, Amy Roberts, please. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a well thought out opportunity to provide much needed housing on underutilised, part previously developed land, partly through the conversion of existing buildings at a time when the district cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. The application has the support of both ward councillors and Woodbury Parish Council. Officers' objections relate solely to distance to services, so that's why I intend to focus my 3 minutes. The site is close to a range of accessible services. There are dwellings immediately adjacent to and opposite the site, and the site is just 500 metres from the arch in the centre of Woodbury. The small-scale development would not result in significant vehicle movements, and any car journeys to local services would be very short. Manual for Streets states that walkable neighbourhoods are typically characterised by having a range of facilities within 10 minutes, approximately 800 metres walking distance. So village services are well within a comfortable walking distance. Yes, there's a short stretch of road up to the village centre that does not have a pavement or lighting, but pedestrians do use this route regularly, something I've witnessed often, walking along the edge of the road. It's a slow speed environment due to the alignment of the road and character of the road. The lack of pavement and lighting doesn't automatically render a route inherently unsafe. Indeed, the collision data clearly indicates that there have been no recorded incidents involving pedestrians along this route in at least 23 years. The applicant can improve pedestrian connectivity by providing an alternative route to the village centre using land in the same ownership. This would benefit both new and existing residents. The applicant can put in a permissive path from the southern boundary to Iveview Lane to the east, and from here dedicate land to the east of the lane as a public right-of-way, up to the existing footpath which then connects to Broadway. Yes, this route may not appeal to everyone all year round, but it would provide an alternative option and expand upon the local rights-of-way network. It's widely recognised that cycling is a substitute for short car trips, particularly those under 5 kilometres, and can form part of a longer journey by public transport. All of Woodbury is within 3.2 kilometres of the site, and Exton Railway Station is within a comfortable cycling distance. There are important material considerations which weigh in favour of the proposals, preserving and securing the long-term future of traditional buildings that will otherwise fall further into disrepair. The NPPF is explicit that as much use as possible should be made of previously developed land, especially if this would help to meet housing needs, which this would. The NPPF advocates the use of small sites such as this for housing, recognising they can be built out quickly. The development would tidy up a prominent site and deliver development designed for a very high quality, with a courtyard feel that takes reference from the existing traditional barns and respects the rural character of the area. The applicant has committed to paying the meaningful contributions towards affordable housing and the necessary habitat mitigation contribution. We feel most strongly that the merits of the case are unequivocal. The NPPF tilted balance applies due to the lack of housing supply, and planning permission should be granted unless any adverse harm would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. This would not be the case here, and we urge members to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Wendy, you have a statement from Benningham, councillor for the ward.
I do. Councillor Ingham would like to recommend the Planning Committee approve this planning application for the following reasons. Approval will reuse derelict property no longer fit for use, utilising a brownfield site. Approval will create more low-cost housing within Woodbury Parish. In recent years, we have approved development of 2 houses immediately across the road. In recent years, we have allowed business development in the neighbouring farm, which is further away from the village community. Recently, another neighbour has been allowed to create an extra dwelling on their site across the road. Approval will enable Venmore to be a sustainable hamlet adjacent to Woodbury. I am convinced if refused by EDDC, this planning application will win at appeal.
Thank you. Councillor Ingham? Oh, Young. Sorry, we've had him. It's been a long day.
He does look a bit like Betsy.
No.
Yeah,
Councillor Young, please.
I won't take that as a compliment.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I can confirm that we have had prior consultation on this application, and I did actually attend the consultations. I'm speaking both as ward member and as parish councillor, and therefore representing the views of the residents I represent. I must say it is a very nice design. This application I originally did not support, as it was outside the Woodbury built-up area boundary, and I did not think that the road link into the village was suitable, which has no pavement and is a busy road. And regarding the safety of that road, it's only because I've had to jump into the hedge once or twice that I've avoided an accident. However, DCC Highways supported the application, and we are also being told that we have to support some applications that are against local plan policy because we don't have a 5-year land supply. So did I support it or not? I decided that I should because of these 2 reasons, and because it was claimed that it is a brownfield site and not in the open countryside. I've been told and read continually that development should take place on brownfield sites first and not open countryside, and therefore that swung my decision. But I still have concern, and so does the parish council, on the pedestrian access into the village. The pedestrian proposed access is along the edge of a green field and would be unlit and unpaved, which I can see will not be acceptable at many times of the year. But however, Highways have no objection to this application. Therefore, I'll leave it to you, good souls, to decide this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Skinner, please.
Good souls, Chair. Good souls. Well done. 2 ward members obviously support this application. The parish council supports this application, subject to the highways. It sounds to me like that's got over with. Devon County Highways don't have an issue with this. I don't have an issue with this. It's on a brownfield site. I actually wonder how it managed to get here, to be honest. I thought it would have been delegated approval. But anyway, obviously the officers had a bit of an issue over it. Anybody who knows this piece of land, and you know, Chair, exactly where this site is, just around the corner, it isn't very far away. You've got the village shop, you've got the centre of the arches where Woodbury is. I don't have any problem with this application at all. I'm going to move a recommendation for approval.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to speak now?
I think it's in page 140 of our pack clearly shows that part of it.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes.
Oh,
sorry.
Finished. I didn't know whether I was to get something through the chair. I was looking at page 138 of our pack, and some bits of that first part meets policy D8, and the next part is because obviously we don't have the 5 years land supply. So that is why I'm more than happy to support what Councillor Skinner said and breathe life into what would be a derelict set of buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor Desaram. Could I just clarify? I think you touched upon the reasons, but Councillor Skinner didn't actually give us any reasons. Shall I go to you, Wendy?
Just to clarify, highways have only commented on the safety of the access.
Yeah.
They have not commented on the safe accessibility in terms of it being a sustainable location for development. I think that's quite an important distinction to make.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
So can we have some reasons then in support of your proposal for approval, please?
Well, part of it is in policy D8, as it says at page 140, where it said, accordingly, it is considered the proposal...
Sorry, Councillor de Sarum. It was Councillor Skinner who put forward the proposal. You may wish to help him in a moment.
I was offering assistance, and I thank you very much for putting me in the narrative.
Thank you.
No, you carry on, Councillor de Sarum, and put him in my name. That's absolutely fine.
No fighting allowed on this committee. Thank
No what?
you.
Sorry.
No fighting.
No, we're not going to fight. No, we're not going to fight. This is on a brownfield site. Councillor de Sarum mentioned that. What is it you said?
Policy D8.
Policy D8. There we go. What's the next one?
We don't have a 5-year land supply.
And the 5-year land supply. Have we got anything else? Got anything else?
No, go with it.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Thank you very much.
Sorry, can we be a little bit clearer, please, in the reasons? I know you're having a bit of a laugh and a joke, but no, exactly. We need to be clear now. So it's on a brownfield site, and what specifically about the policies do you believe that justifies an approval, in your opinion?
Policy. What did you say?
Policy. Councillor de Sarum may wish to assist you.
One bit.
Here we go.
Reuse
of agricultural buildings. Did I say brownfield site? I said that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Brownfield site. Reuse of agricultural buildings. It is considered that proposed conversions under D8 would be acceptable in principle, so we could run with D8. Hang on. Oh, sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
So what I've got then is that it's on a brownfield site. It will be reusing agricultural buildings, and it's considered that proposal is in line with policy D8.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, there are perhaps 3 points in D8 which might support it. A, B and C.
There we go. We've now got A, B and C.
Okay.
Can I come back, please?
Okay, do you want to go to the vote?
Can Wendy respond?
Can Wendy? Yes. Mrs. Ormsby.
So in terms of the barn conversions, officers would agree that they would be supported by policy D8, and if the proposal was solely for the conversion of the 2 agricultural buildings, then that we would be obviously considering them against D8, and the recommendation, the principle of converting those to residential would be very likely to gain officer support. In this situation, there is a proposal to also build 6 new dwellings on the site in addition to the conversions. So I think we would need to understand the reasons for supporting the additional 6 new dwellings, as well as understanding why you may wish to support the conversion of 2 agricultural dwellings. Thank you.
Lack of the 5-year land supply and the contribution, was it 230,000 was mentioned, the contribution that's going to be made. So because the council obviously can't demonstrate the 5-year land supply, as we've heard earlier on this afternoon, I think it's very relevant, and I think it may, in my opinion anyway, weighs heavily in favour of this application.
If I could just come back, just to say, so what I'm understanding is that the view is that it outweighs the public safety risk of people walking on a road without pavements into accessing public services. And the point I suppose I would make is we've won appeals quite recently on this very matter, where spectres have agreed that it is a very important consideration, public safety, public access, and for members just to weigh up the implications that may, we obviously looking at everything on its own merits, but in this instance, members are saying that they consider that having regard to the tilted balance, public safe access to local facilities is outweighed, in these circumstances. That would be obviously what I'm understanding members to be saying, that
Yes, I would.
Agree.
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful here because we could be paving the way for further future applications. Yeah. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I looked closely at this application, and I've mentioned sustainability already today. I think so long as we can condition the provision of the footpath, I feel that this is a sustainable location. It's on the edge of Woodbury. It's within a 15-minute walk of the centre of Woodbury, which has a good range of services. It has been mentioned that that path in rain or in the dark wouldn't be very attractive. Well, you get a torch, you put a raincoat on. If I want to get to the pub enough, I'm willing to risk it. So, I've done it when I'm camping and things like that. Walk to the nearest pub and come back in the dark. And I'd quite like to go and live there myself, actually. And
Put an offer in.
Yes. So I feel it is a sustainable location, given where it is and what it's offering to provide in terms of 8 new homes, and that there's also a mitigation for affordable housing.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right on the opposite corner of there, there was the conversion and a new house built there, and that was right on the opposite corner on the map that we've got in front of us. So, that was in an area as well without pavements, only a matter of probably 50, 60 yards away that caused that. The only thing that concerns me is this path right of way I don't know whether it's the same on everybody's map, but it goes as far as the stream. So what do they have, a boat or swim from there?
I believe there's an existing footpath.
Because it only shows it to the stream. It doesn't show it across there. So there. Yes, so I don't know, perhaps have you have a little dinghy or swim down to the village, perhaps? But anyway, that's something that would have to be clarified.
Can you answer that, Mrs. Ormsby?
my understanding is that is connecting into an existing footpath. There's a footpath that goes along there.
Oh, right.
Well, I can just double check.
Chair, Councillor Young might know a little bit.
Jeff? Yes, Councillor Young knows. The footpath is on the other side of the street.
Oh, so there's a bridge there, is there?
No.
Oh.
Not yet.
Oh, I see. All right.
Right.
Sorry.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Mrs. Ormsby a quick question? If you know the answer, that permissive footpath is going to be conditioned. Can we condition it to make sure that it's suitable for cycling as well?
Just say no.
It's my understanding is not proposed to be a surfaced path. It would be probably something just like a public right of way in terms of. I mean, yes, it's possible to condition the details of the surfacing of that path, but if it was a combined cycle pedestrian route, normally has to be a minimum of 3 metres wide, tarmacked. So that would be taking out quite a lot of land, and obviously. I don't think that's really what's being anticipated here.
Chair, could I just add to that? You know this road as well as I do, for goodness sake. If you had a push bike, you just ride. And what you said, 15 minutes? Well, blimey, that's because of the speed you was walking this morning with the little chairman. But if you was you do it in 5. Yeah. For goodness sake, if you was on a bike, you'd be down there in about a minute and a half.
Thank you. Right, is that all the speakers?
Yes, thank you.
Right, over to you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding then is we have a proposal of approval put forward by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Councillor Desarum. The reasons being that the application site is a brownfield site. It will reuse agricultural buildings. The provision of the conversion of the two agricultural buildings is in line with policy D8. There's a lack of a 5-year housing land supply, so you consider the remaining 6 dwellings anyway will provide a benefit which outweighs the risk to the public safety. And also, as I understand it, that's on the basis that it's subject to a condition to provide a permissive footpath to link the development to the existing footpath. Is that correct?
That's good to me. Chair, presumably all other conditions would be delegated to myself in consultation with you and the ward members, including a Section 106 agreement for relevant contributions. Habitat mitigations being a key one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If we put that to the vote then, please. All in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in support.
Those against?
1 against.
And any abstentions?
1 abstention. So that's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now the last item. Item 11, planning application 221279 full land at Frogmore Road, East Budley. Says the ward member councillor Wright, but he's not here. No. So to you, Mrs. Ormsby.
Okay, so this is land at Frogmore Road, East Budley, and it's a proposal for the demolition of a detached garage and the erection of a proposed detached dwelling house. This is the application site, which includes the application site, but also the rear garden of the host dwelling, the dwelling that currently owns the land. But that would obviously be retained. So this is the block plan. So this is showing you here, this is the proposed new dwelling. This is showing you the subdivision, the garden that will be retained for the host dwelling. And this shows you a new opening created for the vehicular access and a new opening proposed for the main front door access. And I'm mentioning those because the key issue that the parish raised was that along here is a very attractive historic stone wall, and they were questioning the need to have 2 openings within the wall. But on consultation and consideration, officers felt that subject to appropriate making good of the wall, that it was acceptable to have the 2 openings. This is showing you the design of the house, quite a simple design in keeping with the character of the area. And that's showing it in terms of scale and design compared to the neighbour, which is the host dwelling. Shows the footprint, so relatively modest sized dwelling. And this is the application site. So in this area here, planning permission has already been granted for 5 dwellings. And this is the access here into the application site. And this is looking straight in. So these are the garages to be demolished, and this is where the new house would be sited. And that's looking towards the neighbour, looking down the road. So this is the wall that the parish council were referencing in their comments. And another view of the wall, and then looking back to the site. So the site is outside, just outside of the development boundary. However, in this instance, officers do consider that it is sustainably located, and also having had regard to the fact that permission is granted for 5 houses immediately adjacent, and there is access into local services in terms of design, ecology, drainage, highways. On all of those matters, there are no concerns, and in those regards, the development is policy compliant. So, having regard to the lack of 5-year housing land supply, in this instance, where there is good access to local services and no other technical objections, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Could we go back to the garages, please? There. That's the garages there with your little red dot above it, isn't it? Are they listed?
No.
No. Okay. All right. I'll move the recommendation, Chair. But I will make a comment.
Well, can you make... make your comment now.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. I will make a comment. We've just had an application where the officers obviously put a refusal forward for that one, and we've got one not dissimilar, although you're talking about the other 5 houses the other side of it, that you do want to support. And I'm just wondering, I mean, Ed, now, when you sat down, Ed, and do you have good days and bad days, or how does it work? Like, I just want you to just give me a sort of a level up here on how it works. I look at something one day and, I don't know, your favourite football team lost or something and you're not happy, or what is it, Ed? Tell me. Sorry, Chair.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure this is very appropriate. But,
no, I don't think it is either. You don't have to answer that one.
We do try and be consistent, and I think the issue here is this is far more accessible to services and facilities than the previous one.
Yeah.
The previous one was reliant on a footpath going several hundred metres across a field in order to get to the services and facilities on an unmade track with no lighting. Or anything, whereas this has much better access to services and facilities.
Where's the shop,
through
Ed?
footpaths and
the shop.
Well, there's a shop at East Budley, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's within walking distance of this site.
Where?
About half a mile.
Yeah, but
Half a mile, yeah.
Well, it was at least half a mile to the services and facilities in Woodbury from the previous site, but. So we do try and be consistent. I'm sorry if you can't see the consistency here.
I do apologise, Chair. Just having a bit of fun at the end of the day. It's been a long day.
It's getting even longer.
Can I, if I could just comment, if you were to read the section of the report, Sustainability of Location, you'll see the significant difference as to why this is considered to be a sustainable site and the other one wasn't. It's quite clear, page 158 of the officer report.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
I'll second that. What I would like to comment on is the fact that if there's, was it 5 dwellings to the right of that site? I mean, really, basically, simple question, infilling.
Thank you. So we've had a recommendation, seconded. Damien?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, we've had a recommendation, a proposal of approval in line with Planning Officer's recommendation put forward by Councillor Skinner and seconded by Councillor Key. All those in favour, please?
Unanimous. Oh, Jeff, sorry, Councillor Pratt, did you support? Okay, unanimous.
Chair, at the start of the meeting you did set me some homework to do during the meeting. Thank you very much. I've now found the relevant section of the Constitution. It's page 222 for you all if you want to have a look, and it does confirm paragraph 6.5, don't attend the planning presentation unless an officer is present and or it has been organised by officers. Thank you.
And I asked Damien to look that up because I thought it would sound better coming from him than from me. So, so anyway, members, thank you very much.
With my dulcet northern tones. Thank you.
For your attendance today. Thank you to the officers for arranging the site visits this morning. And see you all again tomorrow.
Just as a point, Chair, and I know you're closing down, just as a point, the Mr. I forget his name, Wileyman.
Shall we disclose? Is this part of the meeting or not?
Well, it's to do with your point. It is actually part of this meeting. Mr. Wileyman made a point when I said I hadn't been part of any of the discussions of what's been going on, and they made a point to say that they had meetings, and that Councillor Lawrence and I didn't attend those meetings. It was almost like as if you had an opportunity to attend, but you didn't. What you're telling us here is actually we shouldn't have attended anyway without an officer or an officer's organised meeting. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says.
It was an organised meeting.
Yeah, but not by East Devon.
Consultancy, no. But I did go to the meeting, but I didn't make any comment. I'm not allowed to make comments until I come here.
Exactly.
You're not supposed to really, strictly speaking, according to the Constitution, you're not supposed to attend
to the
meetings with
No,
developers.
I just wanted that clear.
No,
because
you are
it's really
correct
important.
in saying that. Yes.
You're so lovely.